Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound. Committee Room 29, Sound.
Start. Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to this afternoon's sitting of the Education Committee. We have a big agenda ahead of us today, quite a lot of legislative material to deal with, as well as a briefing on religion and worldviews from Queen's University. So there's a fair bit to get through, so I'd ask members to please just work with me in terms of sticking the time in so we can get through the agenda in good time. So, cover housekeeping first as normal, and I would advise members that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online, and I would advise anyone in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they're in airplane mode and that all devices are muted, and I would remind everyone in the room it's not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. So that takes us to apologies. I don't have any apologies noted unless any other members do. No. So item 2 on the agenda then is chairperson's business. Just a couple of things to raise here, and again we'll try and get through anything we have at the top of the meeting here as quickly as we can. I think it would be appropriate just to note, obviously it's been a public statement made that a former member of this committee, Gary Middleton, has stepped down. I would like to just formally put on record my thanks to Gary for his contributions to this committee and wish him well for the future, and I think it might be appropriate just to suggest, even if the clerk was able to arrange sending a card on behalf of the committee, just passing on our best wishes to Gary.
I'd like to second that, Chair.
Okay, well agreed. Okay. In terms of a couple of other items of business here at item 2, I would just refer members to the correspondence in your packs from the Education Authority. That's at page 5, and it's a correspondence from the EA that was now definitely dated, stating that it would not be running special school summer schemes due to the risks around healthcare provision, and we all are aware, obviously, we had recall over recess, and that issue was debated at length. Particularly, we should note that the decision was reversed and provision has been reinstated, certainly in some settings. We also have correspondence from an individual in relation to the decision, expressing concern at the decision to end the provision, and that's at page 11. So I don't think there's probably anything to be gained by rehearsing all of the issues which were covered in detail in the debate in the chamber, but I think there are probably some questions now as we look to the future in terms of this issue, and I would want to suggest, and I'll obviously open to other members to suggest any other actions on this, and it would really be to, I think we should be seeking an update from EA just in terms of what status now are they at in terms of their planning for these schemes. Do they understand what the format of they're going to be? Which schools will they be running in? Have they a clear model of how they're going to be staffed safely, how care plans will be managed, and are they able to provide those assurances that schemes will go ahead, and that they will be able to go ahead safely, and also how they'll mitigate against any undue burden being placed on school leaders and school staff who will be being asked to deliver some of this at pace. And I would also want to suggest we may have some longer term issues we want to raise in that correspondence in relation to how both the department, and I think we should potentially be writing to both organisations, department and EA, how they're going to work together with health to ensure that longer term these schemes can be provided collaboratively, safely, sustainably, all of those issues that were covered in the debate, so that all children with complex needs in our special schools who require these schemes can access them. So I'm happy to sort of put it out there that I think that would be the direction of travel I think the committee should take in terms of any actions on this, unless anyone has anything to add. Kathy?
Yeah, Chair, fully agree with everything that you've just said and all of those actions, but in the correspondence you had mentioned about writing to the Minister as well, if we could write to the Minister of Health too, with the same, because this has just been another example of how these two departments just cannot work together. And it's only the children, as we've seen in this, that are impacted. And you mentioned yourself there, it's the children, it's the parents. This, at times, for some cases, was the 1 week in the entire year that they got a bit of respite. And it just seems so unfair that's how it escalated and how it all turned out. But also in speaking to some of the principals, the stress and anxiety that it caused for those principals who care so deeply about those children and the staff as well, it just was horrific, and it can't happen again. So I think the health minister needs to be involved in this too.
I think that's entirely appropriate. I think it was clear from the debate during recess. It was, and look, we had an unusual moment. We had 2 ministers who apologised on the floor of the House for how this was handled, and I think that should be noted. That is not normal form, that we would have two ministers having to stand up to own some of these issues, and I think we need to be really clear. This is not repeated. This was not how we should be treating either the children in special schools, their families, or indeed the staff working in those schools. So I think we have agreement to get some correspondence away on that basis. Yep. Okay. I did just want to add one other item. We don't have any papers in relation to it, but obviously we'll have been aware over recess, and also in terms of some breaking news in the media today around the EA cyber attack. So obviously that was very concerning and had an impact on students and staff over the summer who were unable to access systems that they may have required. The matter has obviously now moved on considerably, and we're obviously having reporting in the public domain now around an arrest being made. Clearly, the details of that investigation is not something that is going to be able to be shared with this committee, but I would suggest that it would be appropriate, I think, at this stage to write to the EA to ask for as much information as they can give committee on the nature of the attack, what steps they're taking to ensure that anybody whose data may have been compromised is being properly advised and supported with that, what their engagement with the Information Commissioner has been, but also what assurances they can give us around measures being put in place to protect the system from attack in the future. And I think I would just reflect as well, and we've heard evidence on this committee, over a number of different issues, that we're all aware that C2K is an old system and it is in really urgent need of upgrade. So I think if the EA did want to even provide some information to the committee about the level of urgency of investment in that system, because we were dealing with an ageing system here with a huge amount of personal data on it, and we would want to be clear that the investment is being delivered that's needed to get that system upgraded and up to speed, as has been highlighted across a whole range of issues. Anything anybody wants to add to that at all? No, we're all agreed. Okay, that's fine. So that takes us to item 3 on the agenda then. And that's declarations of interest. Any items that any members need to register an interest for on today's agenda? No. If anything changes, obviously indicate as normal. And then item 4 on the agenda is matters arising. So there's one item in your packs there, page 16. It's correspondence from the Assembly research team providing links to thematic papers to support scrutiny of the draft budget. I would propose we note if we're all agreed. Agreed. Anything else that matters arising? Michelle?
I just wanted to raise... just to make members aware, I asked an IQ on STEM placements and got a response back to say that as of the 27th of March there's still 384 places to be found, which I think at this stage in April that's really concerning, and propose that perhaps we would get a briefing on that to know what progress has been made. We had the EA in and there seemed to be a lot of work going on. I've no doubt there's a lot of work going on around this, but we're not seeing the outputs by the looks of it, and that's very concerning, and the worry again of people just creating placements that aren't appropriate as well. So just wanted to highlight that for committee members and see if we could maybe get a briefing on it.
No, thank you for raising it. It's something we've heard evidence from the EA previously, and I think we've rehearsed this, but the date of the end of October will suggest that as that was the critical juncture, and if we hadn't made required progress at that stage, there would need to be quite an immediate and a crisis level response. And here we are in April looking at those numbers again. I'll certainly bring in a moment, Danny. And I think it's really concerning that we still have not heard any direct announcement from the Minister on this, and I really would not like to see last year repeated, where we ended up arriving at summer recess and we didn't even have a written ministerial statement, let alone an appearance in the chamber to discuss this. So certainly open to a briefing, but I would suggest again that we write to the Minister and ask, will he be giving the Assembly the opportunity to be properly updated on exactly where we are with placements, because we seem to now just be accepting that this is what it looks like for parents of children with SEN, that they just have to be put through the ringer every year, and it can't be acceptable. So I would like to hear on a clear update where we are, but what is being done to move us into a planned, strategic approach to placements. And it just seems that we cannot year to year continue in this basis.
I sort of proposed a briefing if we can do that as well, but I think I agree with you in terms of a written ministerial statement. That would be a very good use of one, so that would be good.
Absolutely. Anna, you want to come in?
Yeah, because it wouldn't happen if it was 350 mainstream children not having a place at the same time as their peers. And this is reoccurring now. And to be fair, when they've come in, we have been critical, and that's our job to scrutinise the officials when they come in. But they were implying this year, judge us by this year. And so we will be judging them by this year.
They weren't implying it, they stated it explicitly.
Thank you, Pat. I was going to be a bit polite today. Been best behaviour. And I think, I don't think it will be acceptable for any minister to get up and try and point the finger across anybody else. That's what the officials have been saying, so they have to be held to account.
I think there appears to be agreement then around the table on that. I think it does bear repeating. We're looking at a basic statutory function of the department here to place children with special educational needs in a timely fashion, and it seems to be beyond the EA and the department to do that. And the idea that the Minister doesn't come to the chamber to explain why that we are in the same position again as we were last year. We were given assurances this wouldn't happen again, and here we are. So I really do hope that this is not treated as some sort of party political issue, but that this is about children not being placed at the same time as their peers, and we need it. We need clear accountability on that. So I think we have agreement. Okay. Item 5 on the agenda then is draft minutes. So those are at page 19 of your packs, and that's for the Education Committee meeting of the 25th of March. Can I get agreement that those are a complete and accurate record of proceedings? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. That's signed. Okay, item 6 on the agenda there. So it's an oral briefing on Religion and Worldviews Education for All report, which was a report carried out by Queen's University Belfast. So there is a clerk's briefing note at page 27 of your packs. We have the Religion and Worldviews Education for All report at page 28, and then we have a briefing paper and witness biographies at pages 86 and 87 of your pack. So yeah, if you just get yourself seated, and we'll make a start. So just witnesses are just getting seated. So joining us today we have Dr. James Nelson, Senior Lecturer, School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work at Queen's University Belfast, and then we also have Dr. Rebecca Loader, who will be familiar to most members of committee here from previous evidence sessions, but now Assistant Research Professor at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge, and formerly of Queen's University Belfast, and had a role in this research as well. So you're both very welcome here today, and we're very pleased to have you with us. We haven't covered the issue around religious education in committee in any detail since the institution's return, so that's a really good opportunity, particularly at the particular juncture we find ourselves at, to hear from you today. So I'm really happy to hand over to you at this stage for any initial remarks or presentation you want to make. We'll suggest that would be up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into question and answer from members. So it's over to yourselves.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Chair. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for the invite to the committee. Yes, we want to speak to you today about our research project, Religion and Worldviews Education for All. The purpose of the project was to investigate attitudes to and experiences of religious education in primary schools in Northern Ireland. And in carrying out this research, we really wanted to go for breadth and depth of understanding. The breadth was achieved through a region-wide poll conducted by Lucid Talk, and we got a representative sample who responded to that poll. We'll talk about the details of that in a moment. But in terms of depth, then we spent quite a long time with a group which we called the dialogue group. We met over 6 occasions, and we also then had depth, a kind of deep dive, because we had a teacher focus group as well of primary school teachers. So we tried to get that balance to the research. I think it's important to say that the data collected occurred before the JR87 Supreme Court ruling, so that's important just to flag up, and also before the Minister of Education's subsequent announcements on curriculum review, withdrawal and inspection in relation to RE. But we believe the research is still very relevant, it's timely, and it can inform the processes that are currently underway. Indeed, there is a limited amount of evidence in this space on which to make decisions, and we feel that we really fill that gap. So anyway, on to the findings. We've found definitely there is an appetite for reform around religious education in Northern Ireland. This comes with 2 sides, I guess. There's on one side there's an element of dissatisfaction with the current arrangements. 42% of our polled respondents said that they were dissatisfied with churches having sole responsibility for writing the RE syllabus. But it wasn't just that. In our conversations with participants, one person said everybody's struggling with this arrangement as it stands. Parents, children, teachers, and so there was widespread support for reform as well, and that was in relation to an RE syllabus that they wanted that would have marked social benefits, that would help to reduce prejudice, and indeed would be objective, critical and plural. In terms of objectivity, 68% of people polled agreed that religious education should help young people understand their beliefs as one among many reasonable worldviews. In terms of critical, 72% agreed that RE should help children to ask questions and think philosophically. And in terms of plural, there was strong support that RE should help pupils to understand different religious worldviews, 65% agreed, and different non-religious worldviews, 59% agreed. We feel that this is, justification certainly for major change in the way RE is taught. Some of the critical issues that came out from the research were in relation to the discomfort that many felt about confessional Christian teaching, with some saying that it bordered on indoctrination, and of course that was confirmed by the Supreme Court. While there was withdrawal, and it is a legal right, some parents described it as an impossible dilemma, so they wouldn't withdraw their children because of the risks of stigmatisation or of othering. And also we identified a sense of vulnerability amongst many teachers, primary school teachers, who felt unprepared to deal with the plurality in classrooms that they found themselves alongside a Christian religious education syllabus. So the positive thing is that the groups, and certainly from the survey as well that we talked to, were able to bring forward suggestions for improvements. The dialogue group and the teacher focus group certainly favoured an inclusive, shared form of religion and worldviews education from which no one needed to withdraw. And there was an emphasis there on the desire for inclusive and person-centred approach to education, acknowledging that every child is a worldview. Now, in one level, just saying every child is a worldview seems very straightforward, but on another level, this asks for actually a paradigm shift in the way in which religious education is constructed in the classroom. We want to think about giving equal respect to all children. That's what people were suggesting, so that all beliefs and values were acknowledged. And it's not just a matter of adding on a few extra sessions on alternative religions, alternative to Christianity, but to respect and acknowledge all the views that come into the classroom, so that we would study religion not only through a Christian lens. And lastly, just in terms of recommendations that came out of our research, we recommend moving control of the subject away from the exclusive responsibility of the churches to include a wide and diverse range of faith and belief groups. And this is a point we kind of want to emphasise at the moment, because as it stands, diverse range of faith groups have not been formally included in the review process. Interestingly, in a piece of the independent review of the racial equality strategy, Zazai, which was commissioned by the Executive Office, Zazai really pointed out that including people who have lived experience, people being minority communities, including them in policy making and strategy is fundamental to what we need to do to address lack of equality in our society, and that has not happened in this case, so there's still a concern from us there. Secondly, we recommended the development of an inclusive syllabus, and it was interesting to see that has come through in the terms of reference for the new RE syllabus. Enhanced teacher professional learning was something talked about a lot by participants. And finally, a desire for clear leadership that would ensure coherence, consistency and transparency around what happens in religious education in primary schools. So those are our findings, Chair, and we're happy to take questions.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. You've acknowledged from the outset that obviously since the publication of the research, the context has changed with the drafting of the new syllabus underway. You've already referenced in your remarks the formal consultative role of the churches, but if I could maybe ask as an opener what your assessment is of the current approach being taken by the Minister and Department to that review of the syllabus, maybe looking at that through the lens of your findings.
Yeah, well, as I said, what we sometimes minority communities are characterised as those who wish to remove religion from schools. We did not find that in our findings. Everyone we talked to wanted to make a constructive contribution to an inclusive form of shared religious education. People also commented on the importance of authenticity in the process, so that, yes, we can set up a committee to go away and write about a diverse range of communities and traditions and beliefs, but having those people in the room is fundamentally important. And having them as a formal part of that process is fundamentally important. So I guess our findings are definitely pointing in the way of saying that is something that would be valuable, indeed necessary, in order for there to be a broad consensus and an authentic curriculum that comes out of this particular review.
I think, there's certainly things to be welcomed in the terms of reference around seeing RE as a means to promote social cohesion, increase knowledge of the other, coming from the ruling around being objective, critical and pluralistic. But echo what James said. Also, our research found, and my previous research found, some factual inaccuracies and lack of perhaps knowledge, partly as a result of growing up in Northern Ireland and the training of teachers, particularly those who've been in position for a long time, that without having people from those faith traditions in the room, there's a risk of that being lack of diversity within traditions and so on being recognised as the curriculum is developed. So.
How important would you say it is then, given that the syllabus process we've got now, it's set and probably no scope to change that? The consultation on the other side of that, when a syllabus is developed, how important is it that we get that right to make sure that we really do properly hear from the full diverse range of perspectives in Northern Ireland?
It's vitally important, and there's a slight concern that a strong concern really that those groups are not mentioned specifically in terms of the consultation. There doesn't appear to be any mechanism beyond what's available to anyone else in the public for those groups to feed into the consultation process.
Yeah, no, it certainly did seem a bit of a gap on that, and I think it's been suggested in other contributions on this subject that even the four main churches doesn't even represent the full breadth of Christian tradition in Northern Ireland. It's a narrowing of that in itself as well. wanted just to ask you briefly about opt-out, and in terms of what your research found in terms of whether people felt that the opt-out system was fit for purpose, or if there was a sense that really we would want to move to a syllabus that allowed everybody to participate.
Yeah, I think the feeling was very strongly conveyed that opt-out was not adequate, and again that was confirmed by the Supreme Court judgment. Some of the issues were around stigmatisation and so on, and I know that there has been guidance given to schools now to try and address that. I guess one of the other elements that we found was that what was being offered as the alternative was not appropriate, and also children found themselves being in a room, even though they were supposed to have been withdrawn. They were still in the room when religious education was being taught. Now, the current guidance that has been given by the Minister does not, I don't think confidently, strongly address those two issues. It says nothing about location of the children. And I think that's maybe an omission that could, for schools, definitely helpfully be addressed. And the other one is around what counts as an educational alternative. And there's some suggestions, but silent reading, for example, was one of them. And I'm not sure we could say that that is an equivalent educational experience to sitting in a room with a teacher being taught about religious education. So, yeah, certainly our respondents, I think, would not be entirely happy with those responses from the Minister. I think it'd be fair to say.
Sorry, Rebecca, did you want to come in on that? I was going to just ask then, in terms of on the other side of the development of any new syllabus for committee actions, would the role of opt-out post new syllabus be something that we should be looking at in terms of ensuring that it's minimised and that anyone who is still opting out is getting an appropriate educational experience?
This is a very difficult one, and I'm also looking at this from the post-primary. I know our focus here is on primary, but the opt-out does allow, for example, post-primary children to opt out from topics within that RE curriculum. So how can a compulsory subject be examined at the end of the year when children are randomly being taken out of it? That's a real challenge. Now, of course, in Wales, they have solved all of this because they have made religious education compulsory with no withdrawal on the basis that it is objective, critical and plural, and then withdrawal is not necessary. So, that to me would be the ideal solution. But if that's not going to be implemented, then I think there needs to be very careful monitoring, and certainly the judges, many of the judges who looked at the JR87 case pointed out that there was very, very weak monitoring of withdrawal arrangements, and that was an omission by the department. That was a clear finding.
One might hope with inspection potentially being addressed as well that we could maybe get a better look at that. There are lots of other things I'd like to ask. I want to just ask one last question. It's probably a tricky one, but it's big as I have you here to get your sense on it. The Minister, in his response to JR87, was very clear that there is no need for any change in legislation. This is just about a review of the syllabus. I wanted to get your view in terms of, from your research or from any other angle at which you've looked at this issue, given that we currently have a legislative framework that requires RE to be taught in a way that is based on the Holy Scriptures according to some authoritative version or versions thereof as the legislation in place. Would you have a view if that legislation is still appropriate in the context of ensuring we deliver an objective, critical and pluralistic syllabus for RE?
Well, I guess I would, rather than giving my view, I'd give the view of Justice Colton, whose ruling was upheld by the Supreme Court, and to quote, stated, "The unlawfulness established in this case of JR87 flows from the obligation under Article 21(1) and 2 of the 1986 order, which requires RE and collective worship to be based upon the Holy Scriptures. That is the mischief which needs to be addressed." Now, that seems to me to be very clear that legislation is problematic. I know people have read the Supreme Court judgment slightly differently. I think what is said around that is ambiguous. So I feel that if religious education is compulsory religious education is being delivered as the core syllabus, and the religious education is supposed to be according to the Holy Scriptures, and the core syllabus is not, because it's objective, critical and plural, then we seem to have got ourselves into a muddle or a contradiction at the very least, from my perspective, and as I say, from the perspective of Justice Colton.
Thank you. Just check, Rebecca, did you have anything to add? No. Thank you for that. I think there's certainly food for thought there for the committee going forward in relation to the legislative sort of picture going forward. I'll bring in other members. Deputy Chair, did you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. And I have just a couple of questions. Both of them are related. So, in your opinion, what would a well-designed RE curriculum look like, and what are the core principles that would underpin it?
Certainly from what our respondents had constructively suggested, and in terms of a core syllabus that was inclusive, it would be shared. It would include reference to a range of religious views, world religions and non-religious views in the primary school curriculum. It would be, accessible to all those children at an age-appropriate level, and it wouldn't expect them or require them to have belief in what it was that they were learning, so that they would be open to study the religious education from their own perspective, and that their perspective would be valued within the classroom. I think those are some of the elements, certainly, that stood out to us from our findings.
I suppose my second question is related insofar as, what key features must be built into an RE curriculum to ensure that it's inclusive, balanced and reflective of the full diversity of religions and worldviews?
So I guess any curriculum cannot include all religions and all worldviews in it. So I would suggest that, from my perspective, a curriculum that looks at themes or big ideas and then draws different perspectives on those themes and big ideas would be a very good way to construct a syllabus. And in order to get balance, the drafting committee might say, well, Christianity should be one of the perspectives that needs to be studied in relation to these big ideas. But we could also include, say, a number of other Abrahamic faiths or Dharmic faiths along the way, so that would be a balance of understanding beliefs from different perspectives.
And what about, say, for example, humanism or atheism, agnosticism? Would all of those, or some of them at least, be included in a curriculum?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we've recommended. And also, as James said, if you're starting from a position of perspectives on different big ideas, and particularly taking account of whom you might have in the classroom as well, then of necessity you would want to include humanist, atheist, agnostic perspectives.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Cara, you'd indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much to the panel. Really interesting read going through your research, and I note in your opening statement you talked about philosophy. So my first question is just around, recently I had submitted an assembly written question asking for clarification if the Minister would consider a standalone class to do with philosophy, and he's made it clear it won't be a standalone subject. So I'm just curious, given your research around the role of philosophy, particularly philosophical inquiry, do you see that could be an element of religious education as we talk about new parts of the curriculum? Yeah.
Yes, certainly at post-primary level, it very much is already. And at Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, philosophy is a core part of religious education. Interestingly, in other places, in other jurisdictions, people have built philosophy into religious education as well. I'm thinking particularly of the Community National School curriculum in the South, which has thinking time as part of their primary school what they call patrons curriculum. A lot of work has been done on philosophy for children, both in the UK and further afield, and many of those ideas fit very well, I think, with an objective and critical and plural approach to teaching religious education.
Well, thank you. And then just one of the things I noted when looking through the research was quite a powerful testimony from a student who had been in an assembly, and a preacher had told the children anyone who didn't believe would spend an eternity in hell, and that they found this deeply upsetting. Can I ask then, off the back of that, what do you think this tells us about the lived experience of pupils in our assemblies, and how widespread do you think this is across Northern Ireland?
That quote was it was a teacher, wasn't it? It was one of the dialogue group members, I think, had that experience. Well, we know from, I mean, it's difficult to say how widespread it is, but we do know from research done by Parents for Inclusive Education, where they sent an FOI request to all schools, that religious visitors, among religious visitors going into schools, Christian visitors constituted about 99%. Now, obviously, you can't suggest what the philosophy or the religious standpoint is of those organisations, but there were certainly a number of evangelical organisations who the organisation doing the research would have had some concerns about, I suppose. So certainly those some of that preaching is happening in schools. Difficult to know how widespread it is, but that certainly isn't an isolated example, I suppose, is what I'd say.
I think it'll be interesting to see what safeguards, I suppose, can be put in place to protect kids from those kinds of statements. Just lastly, am I okay? So obviously in Northern Ireland we have a history with religious conflicts, divides. I'm just curious, how confident can we be that a reformed religious education curriculum will actually contribute to integration in our classroom, and rather than simply reflecting the existing divisions that are ongoing within our communities?
Definitely there's a strong appetite for a religious education that promotes peace, that actually addresses issues of sectarianism and of prejudice, of stereotyping and so on. And I think those things need to be clearly included in the curriculum. There has been some of that up to now, but it has been quite limited. And we have wonderful examples of religious peace builders across our community, historically and presently. And certainly those should be making their way into the curriculum and forefronted for children to be learning about, both individuals and organisations that have contributed in that way.
Yeah, I mean, religious education provides the perfect vehicle for all kinds of education for peace. Using the examples that James has mentioned, thinking about concepts of peace in different religious traditions, practices of peace. It could be a terrific vehicle for peace education.
It can only be a good thing, learning about other faiths and upbringings and backgrounds, and it is that peace building that we need here. So no, that's really welcome, and again, really, really interesting research. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. Thank you, Cara. Michelle, you'd indicated.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the evidence today. You'll be aware, I'm sure, that the debate that has followed the Supreme Court announcement, or the Supreme Court judgment, would have been framed by some in a way that's probably unhelpful. So if you are supportive of the judgment in terms of teaching RE in a way that is objective, critical and pluralistic, that somehow makes you secularist and or anti-Christian. I just wanted you to comment on that. Do you think that's, based on the findings, I suppose, from your research as well, do you think that's a fair way to characterise people and their reactions to that judgment?
Certainly, the evidence is that all of the people involved that we talked to in our research were wanting to make a constructive difference to religious education. Many of them, even those who had withdrawn their children, wanted to say, it's not that we want religious education out, we just want an inclusive religious education, one that helps our children to understand those who are in their classes, to help address issues of prejudice and stereotyping in our community, and one that we feel that we can be fully involved in. So, yeah, there was nowhere that we came across people who were wanting to get rid of religious education.
That's it, Rebecca. Just
Nothing further. Just really that the people were actually quite strongly expressing a favourable views of religious education and not merely, as James said, wanting to remove
that
it.
includes people who are Christian. wanting to
Yes,
see this type of
people
change.
from atheist
Atheists.
backgrounds as well, yes.
Your research also highlighted some primary school teachers believe there were concerns with the confessional approach to teaching of RE. Can you expand on those concerns and how a different approach could be introduced within schools?
I guess their concerns were, pick up a little bit about the imposition of religion on children, and yes, an element sometimes of fear that could be experienced by children, and I guess a lack of understanding of the wider community and those within the community. So yes, teachers had concerns in all of those regards, but they also had concerns for how to talk about religion in an open and inclusive way. And for that reason, many of them were choosing not to speak about religion or not to teach religious education. So this culture of avoidance had begun to develop. And I think that would really not be helpful either, because we know in Northern Ireland where we develop cultures of avoidance, that makes problems worse rather than better. So I think certainly, yes, the teachers would want guidance as to how to teach about religious and worldviews in an open manner, in a way that everybody in the room was included, rather than fearing it and walking away from it.
And Cara asked about the peace building aspects. I was going to ask around specifically reconciliation, but I guess I wonder, do you think how far in a Northern Irish context should it be an objective of the religious education syllabus to promote reconciliation, or is it more likely just by having this more inclusive approach that will be a byproduct that you would hope to see, but should it be more that that's something that it seeks to achieve?
I mean, if you look at the survey data, certainly that was one of the factors that people were most supportive of, that religious education should be used for have a peace building orientation. So there'd certainly be popular support for that kind of role.
Thank you.
Okay, Michelle. John, you'd indicated next.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting, and certainly I have no difficulty with a broad and inclusive teaching of religious education, and then let our children make up their own minds. Just want to put one question to you, following up from Cara's question. I mean, other religions have a view, a belief, a faith that if you don't follow that religion, there will be some adverse consequence. For example, Islam, I understand, has its own version of hell. So would your views on the appropriateness of Christian teaching, including the consequence of not being a believer, equally apply to other faiths like those who follow the Muslim faith?
Yes, I think that having a critical and open study of religion requires that people understand all aspects of that religion. I think we need to be age appropriate in dealing with those particular issues, and particularly at primary school level, they needed to be treated with real care. But it may be more appropriate to deal with those issues of ideas and concepts that are higher level concepts of maybe salvation or condemnation or judgment, as a secondary school level, just to help students understand that there. But I don't think that people need to walk away from learning about all aspects of religion, and I think that there are some difficult aspects of religion that need to be addressed. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the positives and the peaceful contributions that religions have made, but I think it's also important that over time, young people come to understand some of the darker sides of religion and the negative aspects that they have contributed to society.
I think it's also important, though, to not mischaracterise particular religious traditions or any religious tradition, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about ensuring that the curriculum reflects the traditions within a religious faith. So there'll be branches of Islam, branches of Christianity that don't hold that view, and so we want to be conscious of reflecting those within the curriculum as well.
Yeah, I just raise a point, and look, there are. I sometimes read a section of the Old Testament. I go, well, this, I find it challenging as someone who goes to a church, and indeed in different churches we now have different styles. And the more evangelical, you not maybe hear hell often in some churches as much as you used to hear, and you talk here about heaven. I just make a point, and it's just a point I'm concerned about, because I've watched a culture in our society where it is safe, almost progressive, to challenge aspects of Christianity. And if we are doing the same with aspects of a minority religion, we are uncomfortable. We worry about being seen as repressive, of not being diverse and inclusive. I watched that culture up close and personal in the criminal justice system, for example. You see a number of Christian preachers be arrested. 99% of the time they're actually released because they are actually protected quite to a high level of law, even to be offensive on the high street. And it wouldn't be my type of preaching. And I just worry, and it's just a general point I want to record, and maybe give me your observation, that political correctness makes it a safer space to be critical of Christianity than it does about minority faiths, particularly Islam. Do you have any comment on that?
Only to say that teaching about religion in schools needs to be done sensitively, it needs to be done respectfully, and yes, there will be difficult questions that come up, but as our research shows, it's not necessarily the issue at hand, it's how you approach the issue. So it's the perspective you take, and if you take a perspective that this is the truth, and the teacher is the person telling you this is the consequence of your actions, or this is the truth, that's something very different than objectively explaining what a Muslim belief in the afterlife is, or what a Christian belief in the afterlife is. These are, these are reasonable things to say and talk about, but it's how you approach it. So I think including those things in a curriculum is not a bad thing, it's a good thing, but they should be approached with sensitivity and respect, and with balance and objectivity. Yeah.
If I just close with that, just to clarify my comments, and I don't believe in hell and damnation being taught to very young children. I don't think any child should be distressed like that, particularly if you believe they're created in the image of God. But I suppose make that point that I think we should just be alert that we are not overcorrecting in the pendulum against Christianity, and that we should be treating all those religions with a degree of fairness.
If I might come back to that, yes, I mean, I agree that if we're going to be critical and plural, we need to be even-handed in our treatment of all religious perspectives. I would just say that as it is at the moment, the forms of discrimination that have been most prevalent in the research that we've undertaken, or certainly I've undertaken, has been Islamophobia. So it is the case that whatever is happening in relation to Islam in the curriculum, which isn't much, particularly at primary level, outside the curriculum, children are experiencing discrimination. So I think we have to take this in the round, that what you're doing in RE is important, but also there isn't a context where children from Christian backgrounds are being are under pressure or discrimination in Northern Ireland schools. So that has to be a factor in how we are approaching this in the round.
So you are saying there might be a degree of compensation for the fact that you see
No.
Christian people aren't. Well, you did say you had to factor in the fact that there is no discrimination there, but there is discrimination in Islamophobia. I mean, that's now on the record. I mean,
No.
is there going to be an overcompensation?
No, but I think that the suggestion that there's currently a lot of criticism of Christianity within the curriculum, it's not held. It doesn't hold up. Currently, we have a confessional Christian education, which is not critical of Christianity. If we are implementing a plural curriculum, which has criticality as a key principle, then that will address all the different faiths that are taught equally. But at the moment, we're not in the position that you're talking about. We're in a position where, if anything, Islam and children from backgrounds other than Christian are subject to greater criticism. And partly, we have suggested in our research, some of that is to do with the fact that there is little teaching of other religious traditions beyond Christianity. So I take your point, and I think it's important that there isn't any that no faith is taught more favourably than another. But I think we have to ground that also in where we are at the moment, and that we don't create concerns which don't reflect what's happening on the ground at present.
Thank you. And I gave John a wee bit of extra time there, but I thought it was appropriate to let the witnesses respond to John's follow-up question. David, you'd indicated next.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to start. Most of the questions are going to be on something else, but just the aspect of confessional teaching and where the line then goes into what was inferred as indoctrination. Where do yourselves or the people that you consulted with consider that line to be?
Well, the line is teaching one tradition as the only truth within a public education system where there are young people from many different perspectives in the classroom. And
if you go to, I'm not from a Catholic tradition. If you send your child to a Catholic school and there's Catholic confessional teaching, which I wouldn't adhere to, but I would fully expect if I sent my child to a Catholic school that it would be taught in that way, and there would be a bias, rightfully, towards a Catholic worldview. They can have pluralistic sort of teaching and informing about other faiths, and rightly so, but indoctrination is a very strong word. Do we believe indoctrination is going on in schools? And what if we're going to use that term? It's important we get what exactly that looks like. What does that mean compared to because we drew the difference between Christian confessional teaching and indoctrination. So where does something stop being Christian confessional teaching and start becoming indoctrination?
There's a big philosophical debate in that area. But we have to come down to say, well, what did the Supreme Court say on this issue? And it was very clear that where teaching about religion is not objective, critical and plural, it is indoctrinatory. I agree with you, that's a very strong word to use in that context because that covers a very wide range of different styles of presenting religion within that indoctrinatory definition, which probably most people...
Which you said, if you don't mind me, can literally be just someone from a Christian faith in a position where they're expected to teach their faith very softly, saying that this is what we believe, and some would read that as indoctrination.
Yeah,
I think if we're going to, and I'm not getting directly at you, but I think if we're going to use the term indoctrination, when the public look at that seems very, very harsh and gives them an idea of what's going on in schools. What we're saying is that actually some people view indoctrination as actually a fairly soft outlining of a particular worldview or faith within a context where they've been sent to a school that is actually a school that subscribes to that faith.
Yeah, I think the need for a clear line between these two things is what was driving the Supreme Court in setting this out, and it is really important for schools to know where they are within that line because they are open to legal challenge around it. So they need to know what is objective, critical and plural and what is not. Yeah. And whatever you call the what is not, indoctrination or whatever, it doesn't really matter, but it's the thing that can't be taught in the objective, critical and plural RE. They also did say, however, schools are free to indoctrinate if they wish, but not in Objective Critical and Plural Core Syllabus RE. So they're free to offer any other kinds of confessional teaching alongside this core.
I think personally, given my personal view, I think some of those schools would have been relatively relaxed about where they were sitting in regards to that. I actually think, if anything, throws up some confusion. It's Justice Colton's sort of social commentary that he liked to offer in making his judgment that you quoted. I think that was mischief making, if I may say. But I will move on from that, just because I do think there's another element to it. We've had talk about all different faiths being treated equally, I think, in response to the last question. But there's also been an acknowledgement you can't teach all faiths. We've talked about the Abrahamic faiths. Well, why the Abrahamic faiths? Why not Druze or Zoroastrianism or something more obscure? You know, there's a reality we can't treat all faiths as equal in the classroom. We don't have the time to do that. So surely there should be some context in terms of the society and place in which we live, and the realities of that place, and how unweighted in terms of what that society looks like. And that can even mean, as we've talked about, not just the minority faiths, but there are strands of Christianity here who wouldn't regard each other as Christian or in communion with each other. So, there are minority churches. The churches, I'm a member of Edom, should just clear that as an interest, Chair, which is not one of the major four churches. There should be teaching around maybe the differences between those Christian churches as well, in terms of that weighting given to each religion within the setting. Would you agree?
Just running up against it with time here, but do answer the question, but then I would have to say no time for further questions on that.
Yes, I just to pick up on the point that you can't treat them all equally, I assume that you mean in terms of time allocation, because the expectation is, in terms of the judgment, that they are treated equally in terms of esteem, and that's what objectivity means. No, you can't treat all world religions, but a well-designed curriculum, and I'm hoping that our drafters are working that at the moment, will be able to achieve both breadth and depth in terms of the study, and things that are both local and appropriate to the local environment, maybe even giving certain schools or areas in Northern Ireland an element of choice, so that they meet the expectation of the wider Transform Ed, which is that certain forms of knowledge are essential and other bits then are kind of supplementary and can be added in. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to do in such a big discipline, but I think it's important that the drafters treat that carefully and try to achieve balance in it.
Yeah, I think I would interpret it slightly differently, but thank you for your answers. Thank you.
You, David, I'm going to be right, just as a really quick point of clarification, there is some legal precedent around the sort of faith that would be seen as the majority faith being given more time in the curriculum, but not more esteem. Is that a fair interpretation of where the matter would have landed in terms of legal judgments?
Yes, that comes through in a number of the European judgments as well, but it is at a level of esteem that's really important. But it is reasonable for states to have a majority Christian, say for example in terms of content, religious education. That's not in breach of the legislation or the High Court or Supreme Court ruling.
And Peter, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for coming along, folks. Rebecca, if I could start with you. You mentioned on just your evidence there that Parents for Inclusive Education would have some concerns about evangelical ministers coming into their school. What would those concerns be?
Well, some of the and some of it's reflected in our research, really, the fact that some of the messaging isn't inclusive, that some of the participants had experienced it was felt that it wasn't inclusive, could sometimes be exclusionary, sometimes was age inappropriate. So it was not the evangelical nature of the preaching per se, but it was some of what that included.
So it was more about the content than the person being there. That's okay, fine. There was census data in 2021 that 80% of people in Northern Ireland, 79.4, I suppose we're 1%, identified themselves as Christian in some way, with 17.4 not been describing themselves as no religion. I mean, given the fact that Northern Ireland, as in terms of the research and data and the figures that we have, is far and away still self-describing itself as Christian, do you not think that should be reflected in terms of our schools, how we teach, the ethos? Do you not think a country should respect the majority of the people who identify as one religion, whilst not minimising the views of others?
I don't think anything in this research is challenging the existence of religious schools. I don't think it's challenging in any way the ability of schools to say we are Catholic or we are Methodist or whatever, and to teach those things to those who wish to hear them and who wish to be included. But we have an education system that says it is open to all in terms of admissions policy, but the curriculum is not accessible to all when it comes to religious education. And it's important that those people who have no choice but to go to a Christian school are, given reasonable opt-outs, and also that when there is a compulsory religious education curriculum, that it is not one that in which they feel that the ethos of the school is therefore one that they must take or must adopt themselves. And that's why the protection is that it should be objective, critical and plural. So there's no kind of, I think from our participants, no sense in which they want to, as I say, change the whole nature of schooling in Northern Ireland, apart from addressing these issues around the teaching of religious education in particular.
Okay. So you don't think, for example, schools having a Christian ethos, let me frame the question. Do you think schools having a Christian ethos is a good thing? You mentioned it in your conclusions. You referenced Christian ethos.
Yeah.
Is it a good thing?
I think that the tradition, personally, looking across the experience and legacy of schools in Northern Ireland, I think Christian churches have contributed incredibly to our education system, to the establishment of those schools in the first place, and to the encouragement of study, knowledge, and progress. So I don't think, and I'm speaking personally here, I don't think there's any dangers in having religious schools in our society.
Do you think there's benefits?
And I think
to having a Christian ethos in our schools.
I think there can be benefits, but yes, very many benefits. But I also am concerned that for those who are not Christian in our society, they don't have a choice.
And I would accept, James, that they absolutely should, and look, those opt out and a whole range of things that are rolling out from JRE7, and I'd like to see that. I think that's me. It seems very short for me. I didn't really get the time, Chair.
I think
properly.
You're exhausted from your previous committee.
It's an interesting subject area. Oh, I've got one more. If Chair will indulge me, and I don't mean a papal one.
Very short question.
So you mentioned in your acknowledgements, apologies. Just getting there. I'm not going to find it now. Yeah, okay. So you mentioned in your acknowledgements Jack Russell and Niamh Cullen, Parents for Inclusive Education. You reference them in the document as well. Would you accept that they are generally regarded as quite a secular group? Would you accept that?
Well, they have a group that is supportive of religious education in schools. They just would like it to be more inclusive and pluralistic, but they're not opposed to religious education in schools, certainly not.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Don't have any other indications. Thank you for the briefing. There were probably some questions around collective worship I would have liked to have got to, but it's not perhaps just in scope of your research, but because obviously there's been a decision taken around how we treat religious education, but perhaps not doing so much in the space of collective worship, but I think time may beat us on that, and maybe one to revisit. I really do appreciate your time. I think it's a really helpful piece of a really timely piece of research, and I think we all wait with interest what comes out on the other side of the redrafted syllabus, and I think there may well be some direct issues to pick up with the department on the back of the evidence session as well. So we thank you both for your time. It was great to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so just while the witnesses are making their way out, wanted just to check in if there were any actions arising from that briefing, and we obviously are in the middle of a redrafted syllabus being put together. But I wondered whether it would be worth just given the issues raised at the beginning of the briefing around the lack of engagement on a formal basis with other faiths or those in no faiths as in a formal consultative role, whether it would be worth checking in with the department what their intentions are in terms of a public consultation on the back of a redrafted syllabus, because I think it is really, really important that we, if we've got the churches in there as a formal consultative role, that we ensure that the public consultation does cast the net as widely as possible. So I would be keen to raise that with the department. I don't know if members are in agreement or if there's anything else anyone seeks to raise on the back of that. Great. Okay. Well, we will leave it at that point then. So that takes us on to item 7 on the agenda, and that is an oral briefing on the Effective Education Holiday Meal Payments Bill. And the bill sponsor will be familiar to members of this committee, Danny Baker, MLA. So Danny's just switching roles today. So there's a wee bit of a mix-up today in terms of what side of the table people are sitting on. And we also have Patrick Gaffney joining us, policy advisor from Sinn Féin. So I would refer members to the clerk's briefing note at page 89, the briefing paper provided at page 91, summary of the bill at page 97, the bill as introduced and the explanatory and financial memorandum pages 98 and 110 of your packs, and a briefing note from Assembly Research on potential consultees at page 118. I would also draw members' attention to tabled papers, as there are some draft consultation questions for members to consider as well, which we can consider at the end of this evidence session. Both very welcome at committee today. So I'm conscious we had our second stage debate, so a lot of the principles of the bill should be fresh in everybody's mind, but happy to hand over at this stage for opening remarks or presentation of up to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into questions from members.
Thank you, Chair. And you'll be glad to know that I'm going to keep my remarks at the start quite brief. I suppose I would start from where I left off in the chamber, that this is the bill that I have thought very hard about, worked the last number of years on, along with my team, our team, and we're very proud of it. And I really thank everyone who has helped along the way. That is the Bill's office and the Speaker's office and all members who participated, not just in the debate on Monday, but in the motions that we have had since we've been back to this Assembly. And I think it's a very important piece of legislation. The policy intent is to support 90,000 children across the North and those who are in receipt of free school meals. That's the policy intent. That's what we want to do. We know that this isn't the silver bullet in child poverty, but it is one piece of a wider puzzle. And I know I said that a lot the other day, because it is. I want to put that piece on the table in this mandate, and hoping that other departments, other members may bring forward further members' bills if they're needed. I would much prefer not to be sitting in front of you today with this. I think if we had been up and running when this was cut, because it could be cut because it wasn't on a statutory footing, it was a very successful programme that helped so many children, and there was a massive raise in food parcels just when it was cut. I think it was a 49% raise, and that came from the Trussell Trust, their research. And if we probably had been back in this Assembly, I would like to think, based on the debate on Monday, that wouldn't have been cut. If I was a minister in the morning, it would have been my day one priority to have done this. I think it's the very least the Department for Education should be doing, and I think other departments need to step up also. I listened attentively on Monday to all of what everyone was saying, and I get it. I get that when it's emotion, it is a lot easier to say your piece and sit down. This will have an impact on budgets. It will have an impact on the education budget. It is an amendment to the 1986 order, and that's why you see that language of the milk refreshment thing. It's an attachment to that, and I think it's the best vehicle to deliver this through free school meals. The education department has all the evidence, all the data. They've done it before, and I really hope that they can do it again. But as I say, I'm here to work with everybody. I'm open to working with the minister and his officials. Since it was published, I've done a lot of engagement over the last 2 years with charities, with school leaders. I spoke about my own experience in the youth club with those children, and that programme was actually run after this was cut, and that support that our community and voluntary sector are doing. And no child should be worrying about food and filling their wee pockets. And I said that, and how are they meant to learn if they're hungry? And I'm just going to finish this because I actually was going through what a lot of what everyone had said and emotions, and it was Kate Nicholl put it the best when I was going through all the different quotes from people. So we're just going to finish on reading of what Kate said, because she's no longer on our committee. And she says, when schools close for the holidays, it should not signal the end of support for children who need it most. No child should have to worry about going hungry over the school holidays. The reality is that the cut to the school holiday food scheme has had the greatest impact on disadvantaged and vulnerable children, and I couldn't say it any better. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Danny. And I'd just probably flag at the start of the session where we've two briefings on PMBs, and then with the GTC bill as well. So I'd ask members just to work with us in terms of time today, so that we can get through the sessions in good time. I'll start just with a really broad sort of question, maybe to pick up on some of my remarks from in the second stage debate, and I suppose it's just around that issue of ensuring that we target this as effectively as we possibly can. Because you've been really, really clear and articulated in the issue, and I don't think there's anybody actually from their contributions in second stage was questioning that there's an issue with children experiencing issues in relation to food poverty and outside of term time and within term time, actually, regrettably as well. It was just really on that stat from the Children's Commissioner that 41% of children who would be classed as living in poverty are not on free school meals. So it's just in terms of the targeting and in terms of when you were putting together the bill and looking at policy options, what was there a range of things you looked at around the ensuring that this is most effectively targeted would be my question.
I think it's probably the most crudest way, and it's been said a lot in evidence in regarding the most vulnerable in society, and it is those who are low income and will qualify for free school meals. The threshold is quite low. A very obvious anti-poverty measure would be to look at thresholds. But when you do look at thresholds, you very quickly go, where do you stop? And look, I really, as I say, one piece of the puzzle, I think ending holiday hunger will always be needed if you're going to tackle any part of child poverty. It will always be needed. But I think as we move forward as an assembly and through mandates, I think we need to look at the universal free school meals. I think that has to be a big part of it, and even if that's in a phased approach. Look, every action will have consequences to the budgets, but it's what do we want to do with the budgets that we have? And I think this is a good start. Would I like to help even more children? Yes. Look, it's primary legislation going forward now. Look, I'm being honest. There's thousands of people on universal credit who are over the threshold as well. If you were to incorporate that to bring them in, look, the cost of it goes up, and we were given a scope by the Speaker at the very beginning of this, and if anyone was going through that process of a private member's bill. And I think it's a fair point. You should be narrow in your approach. If you go too wide, maybe the implications are then too much for one particular minister or one particular department, and they have to have a role in it. As I said in my opening remarks, I would much preferred the minister to have taken this forward. I could say one of the other actions you have to take is you write to that minister to see if they have any aspirations to bring in forward that legislation, and I done that a number of years ago when we first came back, and the answer was no, and that they would work with their other colleagues in communities. Now I've yet to see anything in front of me that tells me that that's going to happen, that will play a role in ending child poverty, and I have not shied away from that. I've been wanting to do this from day one, and I've spoke about it in here and in the chamber, on my social medias, and anybody who would listen to me, that I really believe in this here. So departments know we we're going to do it, ministers knew we were going to do it, so what have they been doing? You know, you can't just wait to the second stage debate and half listening that it was, they agree with it, it's, you know, it's noble. And I might not agree with it in principle. There's an opportunity to agree to it and say, well, let's work together and let's see what we can come up with. But in all the work that we done and all the evidence that we took and all the groups that we met with, all the charities, this is the best target approach that you could do within that narrow scope, and I actually think it's a really good one to have. Now, if it ends up being wider and people do other things, well, I'm here to play that role and work with you.
Look, I completely take that point. If you're talking about raising thresholds, it's that question of where you stop, and that's the appeal of universality really as a long-term goal, and I do understand that. So
just come back on some of that. So on the targeted nature of it, so in some ways free school meals as an indicator can be quite crude. We've seen with the RAISE project last year, the year before, the outworkings of that, but the department has done research itself on these type of metrics and indicators, and they found themselves that free school meals probably is the best indicator that we have available to us. It captures that snapshot of each individual child, whereas other indicators and metrics, you know, you can go down geographic, you know, regional, other indicators, whereas I think the fact you're dealing with kids and families with such low incomes, and you accept the logic that it's right and proper that these kids are supported during term time, then that, you know, it would dictate then that you would support them in the summer holidays.
It's building on the framework that exists, yeah. Okay, look, I'll probably just move on to slightly more just specific technical bits around the bill that just came up in the debate. One of the ones which I have to admit wasn't on my radar that the minister raised was about, he identified potentially a problem with assessing the rate of payment at post-primary, saying that there isn't a fixed price for a free school meal at post-primary because young people have choice often in that sort of canteen type system. And he seemed to suggest there was an issue. Is that something that was on your radar, or that you were, something you reflected on when drafting the bill?
Oh, so when you were drafting it, so if you go back to what it used to be, so it was £2.70, for example. So it's probably easier to explain primary school. If I think about my wee lad, I pay £3.10 a day. So on the Sunday you do your £15.50. Post-primary, they lifted it up. It got increased themselves by the Education Authority, and they publish all this, by the way. They raised it by 19.25%, so it's at £3.34.
Was that a red herring from the minister then in the chamber?
Yeah, it is in fact, because I use my wee lad as an example. So when he goes in, he's not on free school meals, but he uses a thumbprint. He's just brilliant. But you have options of meals. So he likes his chicken curry, but he doesn't like rice. So on the meals, it's chicken curry and rice is £3.34 with say it's a yogurt or drink. I'm not 100% sure on what they offer in that, but the other thing is chicken and chips, £3.34. So if he wants chicken curry and chips, he has to buy 2 meals. Do you know what I mean? So it is set there, and when we were given that direction to the drafters, it was there has to be a price set. So if the EA are going to set and charge £3.10 for primary school, then you then have to pay that back to those who, if you're going to do it over the holidays. So it's just, to me, it's a very natural way of doing it. But again, I'm happy to sit down with any official to see if they think that's a wee bit too, I don't know, I don't think of a better word, maybe clunky. If it's too clunky, then I'm happy to listen to what they say. But for me, it's a bit of a red herring.
That's helpful.
Just for the purposes of the legislation, I think it's more credible to use the pricing than the prices that's available publicly already, so just makes sense.
Yeah, it does seem slightly odd to publish a price publicly and then say that's not a real price, which seemed to be what the minister was saying. Yeah.
And what we've done, the future proof in that, is that the EA do do publish it, but we're putting it on a statement that they have to legally, so that price will be there as well.
That's grand. Look, there's a couple of other wee bits I might raise, but I'll see where other members go with questions at this stage. So any other indications from members at this stage? Deputy Chair, did you want to come in?
No, I'm okay.
You're okay. David?
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for your presentation so far, Hanley. I guess just to come back to one of the points that, to give context to it, I'm not questioning the ending of the previous scheme around holiday hunger, funded, I think, from UK government funds from COVID. Is that am I right in saying that? Mm-hmm. And it ended March 2023, which I do think we have to provide the context in terms of why there was a spike in food parcels from Trussell. I think that was also the time, and you might say it was a strange time to stop it, but again, it was coming from UK government funding. That was also the time that food inflation peaked in the UK, was March 2023. So I think there are contexts in this that should have been maybe taken into consideration at the time, but it's an unhappy coincidence as well that those things matched up in terms of their timeline. So I think when we're talking about the Trussell Trust stats, I think we just need to have that context there. I guess I agree with the comments being made around free school meals and sometimes how that misses sort of the working poor and so on. But in terms of some of the stuff, and look, we've dealt with some of this in the chambers, which wasn't brief the other day, but you've put this to the door of the Department for Education. That's clearly a DUP department at the moment. That's in a year or two's time that may not be a DUP department, But we are all aware of as you've said, the budgetary issues, the challenges that are faced there. Did you consider, whether this should be something that should be pressed towards the executive as a whole in terms of whether a programme for government or a priority there that can be considered on a cross-departmental basis?
I suppose what I said, and I said it at the start of it, it's everyone has to have their own priorities, and that goes for ministers as well. And the executive, I'm not in, I don't know what negotiations that they have. I'm sure it's not straightforward to get agreement on a programme of government because if one party doesn't want it, I have no doubt it doesn't go on it. A lot of my experience comes from lived experience as well. And I take a point on the Trussell Trust, and there's other factors right now. Cost of living is probably just as high, if not as more than it was then. And no child should be hungry getting into school. So I have put it on the door of the education department because I feel they have a role to play, and if each child is to reach their full potential, then they need to have food in their bellies to go and do it. I want to see more right across. I'm
not being pedantic, Danny, but because it happened in the chamber quite a lot as well. And I understand why it happens. But we're not talking about them going into school. We're not talking about breakfast clubs here. It's the holiday element. So it's not really about feeding them so that they're active in school and they can do that. This is about, and I get it, but this is about making sure kids that are in food poverty are getting fed during and the minister outlined a few ways in which he thinks that there might be other ways of doing that, and that's fine. We can get into that at another time. But it is about just making sure kids are fed, and that's a noble goal. But why it sits with the Department of Education specifically?
Because they come back from holiday periods, particularly lengthy holiday periods, and there's a lot of evidence around that. They come back malnourished, and then they end up weeks and months behind their peers, and that's a big problem. How can a child reach their full potential in school if they're malnourished? And I know school leaders and classroom assistants and dinner ladies, and my own local school, I helped out just not long after we were down at the time, so that this had already had the payments had stopped, and our local football team helped out the local schools for breakfast clubs, and they've had support, and as I said, that experience of the youth clubs doing their programmes. So yeah, the impact over the summer in particular is probably the greatest, and then children are getting into school and they aren't learning, and they end up falling out of school as well. That's the other side of this. And Colin McGrath made a really good point the other day, and it's something I've always tried to avoid not getting into, just because it could stigmatise young people. But there's always a speck of trouble in our communities, whether that's in East Belfast or in West. and that could be on an interface area, or that could just be in a local play park. Kids are crying out for help. They really are. And you'll see it, and you just need to go on Belfast Live sometimes in their articles, and you look up and the dates will correlate between times when kids are off school. And poverty plays a huge part in it. And I really wish that I could do more, but I think this is the start. And it's not me singling out the education minister just because he's DUP or anything like that. I just feel that this was the right place to start. And I really do hope that there's other pieces of legislation to come forward and strategies before we finish this mandate, but if not, definitely the next mandate.
And I accept that, and hopefully you'll accept
Hopefully, David,
and hopefully you can accept from my point of view. I know it's the DUP department, we're used to playing our parts in the chamber, but I do just have slight misgivings about it sitting specifically. I'm not that far away from you in terms of the principles behind it, I have to say, and the good work that's done by community groups and so on, in that space around breakfast clubs and so on. But I do think that at a time whenever the education budget is under the pressures it is, and I think we talked briefly, if with indulgence just for a moment, Chair, around, you were saying about universals, free school meals. I know that's a whole different conversation, but where that ends up extended into holiday payments, I mean, what it essentially becomes then, which was my argument the other day, is a welfare top-up. And that's where I think, you'll disagree, but that's where I think it rightfully sits. And I think those things do matter. I think when we dealt with COVID at council, I think one of the things, there's lots of food parcels going out, we all stood beside them, it was a positive thing at a time of emergency. But I think also there's a lot of duplication, and it also took the impetus off those who should have been acting not to act. It shouldn't have been council's role to do that. And I think those are the kind of things that I have a fear of, that we put it on at a budget where it's not supposed to be. But I accept the virtue in what you're trying to do, but I think those are the things that continue to concern me.
Just draw a line. I think very briefly, I think a lot of this was rehearsed in second stage. I think it's important we do move beyond principles of the bill and into the detail, but very
just
quickly,
a very quick point, just from a policy perspective, David, it just, the way Danny has done it through the private members bill and attaching it to education, it just represented the cleanest way to do it, given that education had the data, the free school meals, the applications and all of that there. So it just, to us, it represented a very clean way of doing it.
And in times of plenty, I could understand that simplicity. I just think in the current context, I think it probably is important that we attach the responsibilities to where they best sit. And we can have disagreements about that, but I think that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, David. Cara, you'd indicated next.
I'll try not to repeat anything that we debated earlier in the week, but well done to you, Danny. I know we've had discussions about this piece of work, and I can tell how hard you and your team have worked on it. I just have two questions today. One of them is just about during your time of research and collecting data, I suppose, do you feel you got a real understanding of the broader failure of how different departments communicate, coordinate and collaborate on this specific issue regarding child poverty and children experiencing food poverty?
Yeah, and we don't have to go too far back in recent times to see how poor the collaboration can be in this place, when two ministers really didn't pick up the phone to each other to talk about the special school summer schemes, and I think the fallout of that is not over yet. I think a lot of things were said, and it'll be an interesting watch going forward how they deal with it, how their officials deal with it. So I would like to have seen more coming from communities in the anti-poverty strategy. I know I don't sit on communities, but look, there's a real lack of urgency in my opinion. That's maybe from an outside. Others that sit in community saying being unfair to that minister, but I'm not seeing it and I'm not feeling it. I genuinely mean this. I wish I didn't have to bring this forward. This is something that I wish had been done right from the get-go, and then we could start building more to it. And that's why I call it a piece of a puzzle. Let's get one of the blocks down, and then start putting more to it, and whatever that looks like. It means we're trying to eradicate child poverty, because it's only getting worse, and the struggles out there. And sometimes you don't have to meet loads of organisations and the great work that they're doing, because you see it in your doorstep. I tell the story of the work I do in my youth club, but these children only live a kilometre away from me, and my children have a completely different life, and I don't think that's fair. And I think this is, again, playing that small part. This is only a small part, but an important part.
I actually do understand the mechanism of using the Department of Education, because I've often thought we should rename it, Department for Education, Children and Young People, because everything we do, is all about our children and young people as well. Then just looking at the broader scope, obviously Sinn Féin has the Finance Minister, and I also want to touch on the Minister for Communities. About the impact that this could have on other people's benefits, and what discussions you've had with both of those ministers. Obviously, money seems to be the core issue here about funding this bill and ensuring our children are fed. Can you just detail the discussions you've had either with the Finance Minister, the Communities Minister, or if they've had any discussions together regarding childhood food poverty? I
haven't met with any ministers. I have met with all the groups and done that type of work. Once the bill had been published, I then wrote to all the departments. The first departmental meeting that has been able to get scheduled, like people have busy diaries, was yesterday with Department for Communities, and I know it was raised on Monday that people were concerned that possibly pushing people out of any threshold and all. So I have been assured by senior officials that that won't be the case, and anyone that's ever worked around universal credit or the old historic benefits will know the differences. So universal credit is completely different. There's not that big list of things that could probably push you out, so that's a positive of it. And to my knowledge, everybody now has been mitigated onto UC, so everyone's on to universal credit now. That wouldn't have been the case when the scheme was in during COVID, so you would have had a number of people on historic benefits that maybe would have needed a disregard. I've also been given reassurances that should anything pop up, which they did not see and they've read the bill, should anything pop up, it would be very minute and would be able to be ironed, any wrinkle be ironed out by officials rather than having to go any further than that. So I was really satisfied with that there. I wasn't overly worried. I had done enough of my own research around it, because I have someone in my own office who's really good at benefits and had given me some assurances that universal credit was different. So yeah, I think anything going forward were to pop up, I think it'll be okay.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm content.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just on the affordability question, so that has come up, but it kind of links into the other question around collaboration. Mm-hmm. So I suppose this bill could pose the question to the Minister, if it's not a priority for him to do this, there's nothing stopping him from engaging with his ministerial colleagues around the executive table to work out a funding package to support this. But our priority would be, or our goal would be, that it be funded by the Department of Education, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. John, you'd indicated.
Yeah, look, we've well rehearsed this, Danny. I supported this going to the scrutiny stage because in principle, everyone wants to feed our children well. But I do struggle with some aspects of it in terms of how it's being done. The first is the point, I think it's just worth putting this on record again. So we're actually talking about making sure children are fed, not in term time, and it sits with the Department of Education. Are all of your Sinn Féin colleagues supportive of the principle and objective of the bill? And does that include your ministerial colleagues?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they would be presumably open to having conversations in the executive about how to find the money.
But I would say anyone would be looking favourably on trying to help 90,000 children. And I think, again, as I said, I think this is only one small step as well. I think much more needs to be done.
So you think the First Minister, the Finance Minister and the Economy Minister would be supportive of finding the money? Let's get down to brass tacks.
Well, I suppose you could look at it a couple of different ways. Every single
question, Danny.
Well, but every minister,
you think they'd be supportive?
But every minister has their own budgets. Every minister can spend. And this is why on Monday I made the point, and I didn't want to get into the budget debate of what you don't fund and what you do fund. But if you look at Transform Aid, for example, we had senior officials in front of us, and they were using the very crude way of saying that this is only 0.4% of the overall budget, and that's why you should spend tens of millions of pounds. But if I were to say it, and I did say it, it's 0.6 of a budget, then you'll quite rightly question me and go, well, other expenditures is there? there's no real scrutiny on spending tens of millions of pounds from a minister when it comes to a policy intent. We're having to go to great lengths to put this into legislation, to spend this money and do it that way. So there is questions for every single minister on how they spend their budgets. Should the will of the House be that this is to come into law and the Education Minister really needs that help, then he should engage with his colleagues. And this isn't something that I've just dropped on him overnight. He has known about this from the very day that I came in to this chamber when I wrote to him. Where's the urgency from some of the ministers to deal with child poverty and those who could do it? This is a great way to start that process.
Danny, but you say we'll work out how to pay for it afterwards. I mean, that's fiscally irresponsible. Let me finish, Danny. There are households out there who can't operate like that. Now, I was a food bank volunteer. I've given food in my own time, food parcels. So that's the first thing. I do think there's a degree that we actually need to be working collegiately to achieve this, instead of just putting it on another department. And I say that Department of Education is not, we don't hold it, but I feel some sympathy for them. I don't think it's good governance. And I think the noble intent is actually tarnished by that. The second thing, I have two questions. Is there a cost to administering that we haven't got? So, we've talked about the cost of the food, the money going into the bank accounts. Is there an administrative cost?
Yes. The full cost in year one would be 20 million. 202,752 for the payments. Administration cost is then on top of that 34,155, giving you a full total year one of 20,236,907.
Okay, the final one is this, and I don't shy away from difficult conversations because I say I don't need to prove my compassion because I do. Go around and volunteered at a cafe and things to give them time to create money for the food bank, and I delivered the parcels. So my heart is with those people. But I've also spent a long time in the police service. And I've seen society at its best and worst. I know there are families of all different levels of income and background and religion who more cash going into their bank account doesn't necessarily mean nutritious food going into their child's belly. So we need to see the world as it is, not as the way we want it to be. Can you give me any reassurance that there are any protections for that money that we are putting into people's bank accounts ending up in a child's stomach with nutritious food? And if not, are there any other alternatives like food parcels, like social supermarkets that we could use instead?
I get into politics with compassion and not judgment. So I didn't. But let me read this out, tell you to answer your question. One of the most impactful measures which my party believes was a critical loss was the funding for School Holiday Food Grant Scheme. The scheme previously offered support to prevent holiday hunger for around 100,000 children and young people across Northern Ireland. It is a loss as left families facing deep uncertainty. The end of that fatal scheme demonstrates a failure to recognise the reality of holiday hunger, which is a real and present issue that sadly affects many children today. That was from your colleague Robbie Butler less than 18 months ago, and a motion brought forward by the Ulster Unionist Party, John. So I think that answers your question perfectly.
We are in the same place in terms of the noble intent. There's a difference between a non-binding motion and bringing in laws of the land.
On all due respect, you have criticised members and parties and executives for not bringing forward legislation. You have completely hammered people for bringing forward motions at your time as leader of the Ulster Unionist Party. You now have legislation in front of me. I know you agreed to it in principle, and I appreciate that support. But if you're really looking to dance on the head of a pin to get off supporting legislation, you're really going to have a good look in the mirror.
Danny, this is the problem with our...
No comment, John, just in the interest of time.
I'll just finish this. Nice words, right? I also want to achieve the same objective as you do. I want to do it with the best value for money, with the best governance and the best outcomes. Asking questions, scrutiny, making sure to get things right is not obstructive, and it's not getting in the way, it's not cold-hearted. If we actually had more of those, we'd have less bad laws. And I stand over my criticism of much of the farce that goes on. because we should be discussing these issues. I just think this should be done in a more collegiate way with broad responsibility across the executive. But again, I'll ask you, is there any safeguards or controls to ensure that the cash that goes into accounts ends up in nutritious food in children's stomachs? And if there are not, are there other options than a cash payment, such as using social supermarkets, which are established right across the country?
John, I trust parents. And when it comes to stigmatisation, I'm going to use myself as an example. I was in receipt of a child of receipt of free school meals. In primary school it was grand, no problem. But when you hit secondary school, everyone knows, and you go up and you're getting handed a wee ticket. It's embarrassing. The problem I have with a voucher, and it could be an option, but the problem I have with vouchers is, how do you do it without putting more pressures on? Because most things are now done with QR codes. What happens if you can't afford that technology? Then it would have to be in paper form. I don't want to degrade anybody to walk up with that piece of paper to do it. So I think the payments is the best way to do it. I really do. And I really do trust parents, because some parents may have to give their children less, but it doesn't mean they love them any less. So I can spoil my children at Christmas and at Easter and all that more than what my parents could, and more than what their parents could do for them. Doesn't mean they were loved any less.
And I've seen rich parents who treat their children with neglect, and I've seen the parents who've nothing who are the most loving and caring. I've seen both.
I'm just going to draw a line, Jonas. I think the points of disagreement are clearly and well articulated. So I think, just in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next member, and that's Michelle.
Thank you, and thank you again for your evidence today. I'm supportive of what you're trying to achieve here, and I think it's important that we have to bring legislation forward to deal with this type of holiday hunger. So I hope that we can find a way to deliver something here for these kids. There are concerns about funding that have been raised. So given concerns about funding, I'm trying to get into a wee bit more of how this will work. Would you, and Danny, you've indicated you're open to talking to people and working with people to try and find solutions here. So would you be open to maybe a phased implementation here with a review period, just so you can assess how well the legislation is working when it rolls out? Is that something you've considered yet?
No, and when you say phased approach, you just mean you'd support the full 90,000 children and then evaluate it after.
Well, maybe
a couple
not.
Years.
Maybe just taking a smaller cohort and seeing how that works in terms of what your legislation is, how it works in practice, to assess that it's being effective, and then expanding the rollout based on confidence that the value for money and the impacts that you want to see are there.
I think targeting the free school meals and 90,000 children is probably the least we could do. If I'm being honest, I think that is the least we can do. Would I love to see it to support more? And I said that to Nick earlier on around everyone on universal credit. Don't quote me here because it could be off my figures, but I think it's something around 40,000 people who are on universal credit are over the threshold. Mm-hmm. So I would prefer to go the other way rather than going back the way. So I'd rather go further if we're going to do that. Obviously that would bring a greater cost to it. I think there was evidence around the time that it was running, but if it can be fitted in to say that you review it, you keep an eye on it, and it's primary legislation, I don't know if that could be done.
I think I guess what I'm getting at is, I think getting something on a statutory footing that, I guess, says that we're going to do this, we're going to deal with these kids, is something I'm supportive of and wanting to see. There are going to be challenges around budget and challenges around getting agreement on something that people will feel comfortable signing off on. So I'm just really trying to throw some ideas. I'm not saying this is what we do, I'm just sort of saying where is the flex, and maybe trying to make sure we can get something over the line. I
know this is a different type of legislative intervention than what went before, but I think your pilot was the food holiday grant, essentially. I think if you looked at some of the evidence, I think Danny spoke about the Trussell Trust reporting a near 50% increase on food parcels in the wake of the thing being cut. So I think we actually have enough evidence just to get on with it, to be honest.
I know my remarks during the second stage, I did sort of suggest this scheme would evidence broaden it out further. So, there's two ways to look at that, but I just know there's clearly a challenge here in terms of the budget. So, and again, in terms of measuring success then, have you considered how you will ultimately measure success here rather than just delivering it? Will you look at how this scheme contributes to educational underachievement, for example?
Yeah, well, as I say, it's only one piece of the puzzle. I think it will definitely help children, but we have to do much more. I guess this isn't simply me saying or anything like, if we do this here, that's our job done. Far from it. It's only the beginning. We need to tackle poverty if you're going to tackle educational underachievement. There's no question about that. And I suppose, sorry to use it when your question was, I forgot about this earlier on. I haven't really spoken about it enough. I know I only need the majority to do this. I would love to do it with everybody. But I also want to do it that we don't miss a holiday period either. And it hasn't been talked about enough, the commencement of it as well. It would destroy me if we were to get this over the line, but it was done and held up and we missed a holiday period. And I'm really thinking about summer 2027. We cannot miss 27 that summer, because that's the big one. I would love to be done for Christmas of this year, to have it for Christmas. I know that's ambitious. I'm going to ask the chair. I would happily come in here every single week and get the faces every week to pull that off, and work the 4 in the morning to pull that off. But that's just something that we pointed at to do earlier on. Yeah, and I think it will have a massive impact, but again, it will not have the impacts without other initiatives.
And you've obviously decided the best approach, and this is, again, you've described how scope has to be narrow for a private member's bill, and you know what you're trying to achieve here in terms of holiday hunger. Did you look at other approaches in other jurisdictions? I mean, broadly speaking, you have models in other places which is more of a summer scheme type model that provides a meal. It adds, was there a benefit there in terms of childcare as well for families? So did you look at those, and is there any particular reason why this model you felt was the best? Are they practical reasons because we've done it before, or just wanted to get a wee sense? Because a lot of people have suggested there's a lot of other ways to do this. And as I said in the day, this is what's in front of us though, so I just want to understand your process to get
as
here.
briefly as possible.
Yeah, and I think there is some great programmes out there, but a lot of them do focus around 2 to 4 weeks, maybe over summers. The reason why I like this one a lot is because it's over all the holiday periods. And I have tried to future-proof this as well. Should the minister or any minister want to change their holidays, that they can do it. But you're getting summer, you're getting Christmas, you're getting Easter, you're getting our 2 midterms. I think that's huge to take that fear for families. Like, you could just imagine that could be, if you have multiple children in the house, I mean, that could be one of the week's groceries done. And especially when it's cash payment as well, it's like, it's there and they know it's there. And I think that would be a big relief for families, rather than just maybe a 2 or 4 week or 6 week period. And I'm not saying that them schemes aren't good schemes and don't have good results. I'm not saying it because this is our legislation. I just think it's the best start.
Another issue as well is the cost, the capacity, the personnel, the availability of settings and all of that type of thing. It would have become probably undeliverable in a
I guess
private
there would
member's
be
bill.
certain holiday periods as we've described where that wouldn't be practical. So there would be periods where the families are left without support. Yeah, okay, that's great. Listen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Peter, you'd indicated.
Good, thanks, Chair. And geez, Danny, if you could talk for Ulster, if you were on a committee every week, we would go on till 6 o'clock.
Peter, seriously, do you remember the other day?
You weren't even meant to speak on Monday.
I wasn't going to even speak on this bill. This isn't my time yet, Chair. I haven't got a question in yet. I haven't got a question in yet. Look, I did my own piece of work on holiday hunger before, when I was unemployed after I was SPAD for a while, and found it really interesting. One of the things I looked at, Danny, was the different how holiday hunger is addressed across the UK and Ireland. England do it the best. I'm sure you have as well. England do it the best. Most of the other regions don't have anything to address holiday hunger. It's not a reason not to do it if it's the right thing to do. The English model is, as you've recognised, slightly more complex, but they offer sort of supermarket vouchers and stuff like that. Is that something that you'd considered at all?
It was in my consultation around the vouchers or cash payments, and it was in the briefing note that they sent in, and has all the breakdown of my own consultation. There was about 1,100 people corresponded to it. Very good, very good consultation for a private members bill, and one of the outworkings of it, majority of people favoured that it would be a cash payment, because I outlined it earlier on. I think vouchers leaves you open to being that stigmatisation of it, and you want to avoid that, because we're talking about, and there was numbers earlier on, we're all based that on 100% uptake. Right now, the uptake on free school meals is at 80%, and there's issues there within it, and stigmatisation is one of those. So I'm hoping that this bill would also encourage everyone who's entitled to it to take it up. So it could be a very positive consequence of it, but a positive one.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the reason I asked that question is what I'd like to see if this bill was going through is some mechanism whereby it would be spent on food, right? Kids would get food from these payments, okay? And John mentioned it in passing there. We have 22,000 families in Northern Ireland that are known as social services with kids in them. These are families that are really struggling with a whole range of things. And I remember I do some work with various organisations, and somebody who was a volunteer said they were going out to a household and they were delivering a food parcel. They got to the house and there's 2 dogs. And when they got inside the house, they noticed that the family had, getting emotional telling the story, Sky Sports, and the person said, like, we're delivering food, and that those parents.
I left you a message last week for the Dr. Rigby.
Somebody tell him.
John.
I'll just keep talking really loudly, and I'm not so emotional anymore. But essentially. The store. So they described that situation, and they said to me, those parents weren't spending the money that they had, whatever it was, right? And that's my fear, Danny, for some families. And I hope you accept my heart in this, that I would love to see whatever it is, £30 being spent on food. But I don't know if every family will do it, and maybe it's just the best we can do. I don't know what you think about that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but we don't know people's circumstances, and things can change. And COVID was actually a really good eye opener for myself as well. I was in Belfast City Council, but I was also a part of local initiatives. And this is before people were shielding, and there wasn't access. There was no vaccination at that stage. And people needed support because they didn't have family networks. So it may not have been a financial reason. I'm just using COVID as a financial reason why they were getting a parcel. It was because they had no one to give it to them. And very quickly, your life can change so quick. And the pandemic was a real eye opener to me. And I come from a trade before I went into politics, and a lot of my friends are in trades, and they learned a lot of harsh lessons there. So they did, and people can fall into poverty very, very quickly. Yeah. And
all the paychecks.
And you don't know, and your stories around someone has Sky on. You don't know what the reason of what channel that was, or what, or maybe they had a fire stick. I don't know. But like we can't have them. we can't go into that realm. I think of judgment. I think we have to trust families, and also parents are out there probably spending every last penny that they have on food, and maybe if this payment come in, it'll allow them to put it in for electricity, for gas. There's other things at play that I think that a cash payment could really, maybe I pay for a bill. I'm not saying that's not what the bills ask people to do with that money, but people's circumstances, and just it's 90,000 children. I'd say the vast majority of them will really benefit from it.
Okay, look, I said your wider point. The only other thing I wanted to touch on, there's a few things, because it's an interesting area for me, because it's something I'm pretty passionate about, is just the cost. And obviously we know that the education budget, looking at next year, I had it up here, is going in the deficit by about 600, and this is just going to be an additional cost. Without getting into the he said, she said of it all, do you accept it's let me ask you, do you accept it's an additional pressure for the department? Okay.
I've been very, very clear about that. I know this will have ramifications for any minister, the education minister in particular, and if the burden were to be put on him, and I'm saying it as a burden because that's what's being portrayed, right? But if it was, right, at the end of the day, the minister can turn around to his colleagues in the executive and say, let's talk. Let's see what we can do. Let's have these conversations. We are technically forcing the hand of them with this private members bill to do that if it's the will of
just in the interest of
House.
time to let Peter, I think you have a follow-up you want to come in with, Peter. I'm really conscious that we're against it with time.
You're getting some control over him, Chair. I can see this. You have to apply this all the time now. Look, I accept that. I mean, I suppose what I would say is, and Pat had a go at answering this question in the chamber. My concern, because I actually think the intent, if we can actually get food into the mouths of kids over the summer, I think it's a really good thing, to be quite honest. I'm not sure this will quite deliver what the intentions are, but if we can, that's a really, really good thing. I suppose my fear is the size of it, which is big. I know it's 0.6, 0.4%, but as I said, the budget isn't really the budget because we're spending about 80 to 85% on salaries and SEN. Would you support the Minister, for example, going to executive colleagues and saying, this is additional pressure I have, can we ring fence this?
I wish you had had that conversation.
Brief answer.
Yeah, I wish you had had that conversation when I first wrote him 2 years ago. Look, as I said, this bill is presented to use it. It's now the will of every member in here. What happens to it and what way it finishes, this is the house. If you put the curtains and the pillows and every bed else and the carpets, that's fine. We'll see how way it plays out. And I'll leave you with this. What is the cost of not doing this?
And what you're describing is, I suppose, is what I was saying in the chamber, Danny. It's not what it's the opportunity cost of not doing something else. It's, if you look at the education budget, what you're saying is, if this is one additional, if 1p more than what they're spending, and we could have a difference of opinion. You might say transform it, bin the curriculum, bin this, bin that, whatever, to pay for this, and that's fine. But what you have to accept is by doing this, as noble as it is, I wouldn't want to see other areas cut because this is here. If it was extended schools, if it was additional support for special needs kids. I'll leave that, Chair. Sorry, and thank you for your additional indulgence.
I understand, and it's for first chance to air the issues in committee. Wanted to make sure people had the opportunity to do that. We do have a big agenda today, and I would just remind members that we really are beyond principles of the bill territory here. This is now into the bill that's before us. So just as a reminder on that. Thank you for your evidence. I'm not sure what the protocol is in terms of where Danny sits as a member now for any ongoing discussions around this. I think, Patrick, that's your rule's done.
So I think you can just stay there.
Remain.
For further actions.
Further actions arising, and there's some other bits to dispose of. Okay. So the first thing I would just want to suggest in terms of this, and I think it's really on the back of Cara's question, is I think a letter to the Department for Communities around the impact and other benefits, just for their assessment of any consequences of the bill for anyone who would receive a payment who's in receipt of any other benefits. I think it's important we have that clearly from the department if members are all agreed as an action arising. Agreed.
Can I make a point as a member, or am I
You're the bill team, so you can.
I would suggest bringing, as part of the evidence, bring the officials in, hear from them.
Yeah, we'll certainly come to who we'll hear from in a moment on this, and I think hearing from DFC may well be an action we need to take. So a couple of other bits and pieces in terms of just the logistics. There is the issue of the length of committee stage. So I'm informed through the clerk that we'll have a outline timeline brought to next week's committee, and in a week we can make a decision on that, and then there'll need to be, if there's an extension, a motion to the House, but we can deal with that in next week's agenda, if I understood that correctly. Yes. Yeah. The other issues then are around who we would seek to engage with as a committee in terms of stakeholders that we'd be reaching out to. So I'd want to suggest that page 4 in table papers, there is a stakeholder list there. Our members' content that we proactively reach out to those stakeholders, and then there will be a further discussion then needed around who we actually wish to hear evidence from, and I might ask the clerk to speak to that in a moment. But at this stage, are we okay to agree proactive contact with that stakeholder list at page 4 in table papers? Agreed. And then we have a draft survey for the committee to issue to seek public responses on the bill, and that's at page 11 of tabled papers. Are we content to get that issued as soon as possible after this meeting, if we're all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, so I'll maybe just ask the clerk to speak to processes for identifying witnesses for this. I think some of that is already perhaps in progress. We have some of that scheduled. If I could ask you to speak to that.
So the committee will write to all the other statutory committees for their input and ask that particular question of communities, the Department of Communities via the Committee for Communities. The sponsor has already given me a list of stakeholders, and I have reached out to them. So I have provisionally Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Children in Northern Ireland scheduled in the forward work plan. But there's a list from RAISE that we can approach to ask for in writing at least. And members will discuss next week the timelines and decide how many evidence sessions they want to have, because I know that the time pressures are something that members will feel strongly about. Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring you in a moment, Peter. Are we content with that as an approach? I am conscious of time. I think for any legislation we're now dealing with, we're very much up against the clock on it. So I think we would want to obviously make sure that we do the work that's necessary, but also to give any bill that comes before committee a fair wind to get through the stages in a timely fashion. There may be scope if there are stakeholders with similar interests in the sort of anti-poverty space for a panel approach on that, which we could maybe do to try and limit the number of sessions, but to hear as widely as possible. But we can maybe work through that in detail at next week's session. Peter, you'd want to come in there.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It was just on the potential list of consultees. I just couldn't get my table of papers open quickly enough. The interesting one there, you have Brown O'Connor down and their public affairs company, which is a slightly unusual one for consultees around education and holiday meal payment. Notwithstanding that, and I have no issue with that. CARE, who do work on holiday hunger throughout the UK, and the Evangelical Alliance, who were doing some work actually very recently up there with the Centre for Social Justice around young men, I think have both done work in this area and should at least be on the list.
No objection to that whatsoever.
For social justice in their own capacity, or just
so you could actually ask the Centre for Social Justice, but it's CARE and the Evangelical Alliance are two that have done work across Northern Ireland around this area. So those would be two I'd probably add that, as long as no one has any issue with that.
No issue for me. Okay. So David,
just in terms of other actions, whether it be worth writing to the Finance Minister and asking whether, and perhaps the Executive Office, in terms of asking whether the Executive as a whole will give consideration of this, but whether the Finance Minister will consider looking at ring-fenced funding from the Executive in order to provide whatever department is going to be delivered through. That I think that this deserves cross departmental consideration, and write to them with that impetus, I think.
Certainly no objection to that, unless anyone has anything to add. Agreed?
I just endorse that, yes.
Okay, thank you, John. And
are you sure you're endorsing it, John?
That's a big endorsement on those thumbs.
I was mildly embarrassed there. No idea.
There were just multiple thumbs ups appeared all across the screen. It was quite a
the first time I had that reaction, Joe. Thank you very much.
If it makes you feel any better, John, I had a similar experience in the Democratic Scrutiny Committee, except lots of hearts came down from the sky in DSC. So at least you just had thumbs.
Okay.
Feel the same way about you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That's grand. And then the only thing I would just add is I'm assuming we would be inviting the Department of Education officials in to speak to this, and I think possibly
they're in the programme
scheduled already. So
that's
grand. Just again, I'm very, very, very conscious. We have quite a bit of slack in our forward work programme, which we can come to in June, but I think we will require that for the legislation that's coming through. Okay, so I think that's everything confirmed and finished up from that item, unless there's anything that we need to add, or we can move on.
No, just on the funding matter, I mean, the way the bill is drafted, it is an education bill. So really it would be the bill sponsor that would primarily be engaging with anyone else who might be wanting to do this in a different way. But yeah, certainly the correspondence will go as the committee has agreed.
We can see what comes back.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, members, that takes us to item 8 on the agenda. Now we are just running a little behind time, but I do just want to give members the option of a short comfort break if that's helpful. But if members are content to continue, I'm content to proceed through the agenda.
You're going to run at some stage.
Okay.
Look, you can continue on.
I think we can. I think it doesn't look like there's a mad dash. If we can,
I'll wait till Todd finishes.
And everybody now indicates it. Like, yeah, no, we'll, if you wouldn't mind turning the live feed off, we'll take a short comfort break. Okay.
Very short.
If I could just ask for like 5 minutes. Yeah.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Live feed is back on, members, so that takes us to item 8 on the agenda. Just remind members we are running behind schedule and have a lot on the agenda, so would ask that we do try and move through questions as quickly as possible with minimal preamble where possible. Item 8 on the agenda is Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill, and it's an oral briefing. And I would refer members to the Clerk's Note at page 126, the briefing paper at page 128, the consultation summary report at page 130, the bill as introduced and explanatory and financial memorandum at pages 139 and 151 of your packs, and a briefing note from the Assembly Research Service on potential consultees at page 159. There are some additional materials in table paper similar to the last briefing around agreeing the committee consultation survey to go out as well. So welcome today again, familiar to committee members, Pat Sheehan, MLA, who is the bill sponsor, and Patrick Gaffney, policy advisor from Sinn Féin. So as with the previous session, over to yourselves for any opening remarks, and then we'll move into question and answer from members.
Irish medium education has been expanding rapidly over the last number of years. In fact, it's the fastest growing sector within our education system. And there are elements of our education system that haven't kept up with the growth of Irish medium education. And one of those issues is the recruitment and retention of not just teachers, because I mean, a lot of people think this is just about teachers. It's not. It's also about early years, and it's also about support for children with additional needs. And all of those issues are important and need to be dealt with within this piece of legislation. We wrote to the Minister, and I'm sorry to be slightly repetitive on some of the stuff that was said yesterday. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible. We wrote to the Minister to explain what we were going to do, as we had been advised to by the Speaker. The Minister wrote back saying he was in the process of developing a strategy, and that strategy he hoped would be ready in mid-2027. So the Minister might not be in a job after the next election, so he's not in a position to say whether or not he could deal with the strategy. And unfortunately, one of the problems within the sector is that there's no trust there with the DUP having control over a strategy. Unfortunately, there's hostility towards the Irish language among a number of parties in the Assembly, and the accusation has been made that Sinn Féin has been weaponising the Irish language. Fair enough, if that's what people want to believe, and if it is what they believe, then attack Sinn Féin. Don't be taking it out on children trying to get an education through the medium of Irish. And if we look closely at the difficulties that exist in Irish medium and the challenges that exist, they don't exist in other sectors. And I'm on record as saying, both here and in the Chamber, I will support initiatives to improve educational outcomes in any sector for any children. I don't care where they come from. My passion in education is to ensure that every single child gets an opportunity to have a good education. It's an escape route for poverty, among other things, and I support any initiative brought forward by any minister to do that. There's clearly a difficulty in Irish medium education, and hence the reason for bringing this forward. There are other issues, but again, as Danny pointed out, the Speaker made a ruling that all members' bills must be narrowly focused. So we decided that we would focus on a workforce strategy, and that's what we have done. And I'm going to leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Pat. I don't have a lot of questions to ask on this. Again, it's a short bill, and I think its intent and impact is fairly clear. I wanted to pick up on one issue that came through the second stage debate, and almost in every contribution was the very particular impact of workforce challenges around SEN provision in Irish medium, and just that extra layer of challenge, accessing educational psychology assessments, accessing speech and language therapy, even classroom assistants who would have the necessary fluency in Irish to support a child. Just looking at what needs to be included in a plan, did you give any consideration to directly referencing the SEN workforce in that, to ensure that is something that is addressed in the workforce plan? Well,
not explicitly, but it is there in the overall context of the bill that we're talking about, and it is referenced in the bill. That there should be. Where is it?
D, they're the different functions.
In Part D, the different functions of persons within the workforce. So it's not just about teachers, and that's intended to take in the broad swathe of all workers within that within the Irish medium sector. So, I pointed out yesterday that children who go to English medium schools, they have educational assessment and follow-up. There's SEN-related training and advice provided by the Education Authority. There's local impact team interventions and access to specialist provision support services. In Irish medium education, it's a distinct education system in terms of the language of instruction. And in many cases with children, Irish is their first language. And so if they require additional support of some sort and it's not available in Irish, then those children are immediately at a disadvantage. And that's why it's so important that we cover every aspect of the workforce within the Irish medium sector.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do appreciate
Just,
that. Yeah, no,
supplement that.
Yeah.
So, as Pat said, so the scope had to be narrow. So initially we wanted to do a more comprehensive bill to deal with some of those issues that you've touched on regarding SEND. So when the scope was kind of reduced and restricted, we had to try and be somewhat clever, I suppose, with the SEND aspect. So we are trying to deal with it via that workforce. So that section D is trying to be all encompassing. So we're trying to do it there. And I think it'll be quite clear. So the bill itself sets out the parameters for consultation and what a plan should look like. So you would like to think that, you know, when enacted, those SEND issues and mostly the personnel behind them and all will be addressed that way, you know. So
yeah, no, and I do appreciate that, and I know that particular section that references the different functions of persons within the workforce. I suppose it was just, to my mind, SEND came through so clearly as to whether or not there's maybe a need to just make that very explicit on the face of the bill, but something for the committee to consider, particularly as some of those professionals may be in the health sector, and whether there would be any argument from the department that maybe it's not their area of responsibility, so they end up being missed out of the plan. And it's maybe just something as we go through the process that I wouldn't mind exploring. But I don't have any further questions at this stage, so I'll take indications from other members. Cara,
Yeah.
Michelle, Cara first now.
Pat, thank you for being here, and yourself again. I just have two questions today, as we did have the debate earlier in the week. So I have a firm understanding. When I first became an MLA, I was so just in shock at the state of some of our Irish medium schools, and speaking directly with our school leaders, particularly at Gael College Shadura, seeing the work and the effort and the time that they put in, and the lack of sense of stability and security was really, really shocking. So I really welcome that you're bringing this forward, Pat, and I know you're really an expert when it comes to this field. Just two questions then. You've stated your bill will place a statutory duty on the Department of Education to develop, publish and maintain a workforce plan. And publish it every 5 years. Without this legal requirement, there's no guarantee of continuity or accountability, particularly when members change, and I think that is so important. Can you expand, Pat, if your bill was not to pass, where would you see Irish medium education? What would it look like over the next 5 to 10 years?
The bill isn't passed.
If it doesn't pass.
Well, that's the difficulty, because the sector is already bursting at the seams. And I give the example yesterday of College de Firstja, which underwent a major redevelopment about 10 years ago, and it was for 550 pupils, and there are now over 1,000 pupils in that school because the department hasn't managed to procure a site for a second school, preferably in North Belfast, and that creates problems within College de Firstja itself. Because you have a school for 550, there's 1,000 pupils. It's going to impact on the wear and tear of the school. It's going to impact on access to toilets and other facilities within the school. All of those problems, and in a sense, that's a microcosm of what's happening within the sector overall. So, if the issues aren't dealt with, and as I say, this was because it was a narrow scope. There are other issues that we would have liked to have dealt with. And when Professor Noel Purdy did his research, he pointed out that on average teachers in Irish medium are working 47 hours a week, and a lot of that is down to translating resources that aren't provided to Irish medium schools that should be, but teachers are having to translate them themselves. So there's an issue about resources and materials that we would have liked to incorporate as well, but we made the decision, if we made it too wide in scope, that the Speaker wouldn't allow it through. Yeah. So there's other issues there, and then issues around capital investment as well. And you know, we talked about this statutory duty on the minister to encourage and facilitate Irish medium education. And one of the good things about that is that it gives a minister flexibility. And one of the things that really annoyed me in a previous mandate was that Gael College Gura had applied to be on the capital bills list. And the minister at that time refused to do that because they hadn't met the threshold or number of criteria to get on that capital bills list, because they hadn't met the enrolment threshold. But they were able to show a projection of the increase in enrolment over the following 5 to 10 years, and they were easily going to meet that threshold. And I mean, there has been an exponential rise in the number of students in Gael College Gura. The minister, by virtue of the fact that she at that time had that statutory duty to encourage and facilitate, could have used that as a reason for putting Gael College Gura on that, but didn't, you know. And the statutory obligation is there for a reason, you know, to help bring the Irish medium sector up onto an equal footing with other sectors. And that's a difficulty. And unless, and it's one of the reasons why we felt the need to bring legislation, because we just don't need, expect certain ministers to deal with the Irish medium sector in a fair way, and that's going to do damage to the sector in the long run.
So just on your question, what happens if this doesn't pass? So if the workforce issues aren't addressed, you're going to have, so at the minute you have Nice Cullen that are bursting at the seams, primaries, and so that conveyor belt going into post-primary. You're not going to have the subject specialist teachers. You're not going to have the capacity to support the level of numbers of pupils coming from primary school. So you're going to have children that won't be able to continue their educational journey through the medium of Irish, you know. So that's how kind of fundamental it is, you know.
I've seen buildings are a real issue. I recall a school in Fermanagh, an Irish medium school. They were promised a new building, they didn't get it, and you know, for many schools across the north, they're still in these sort of mobile classrooms, prefabs that haven't been updated for decades. So that's why I was disappointed yesterday by the TUV's comments. It wasn't about prioritising Irish medium education. It's essentially equity and bringing them up and giving them the rights, fairness and investment that they so rightfully deserve. Just last question.
Very brief, Karen. Yeah.
What do you see? I'm reading a book at the minute called The Broken Harp, and it talks about the state's role in promoting the Irish language. I just wanted to ask a final question. What's your vision, your long-term vision for Irish medium education? You know, stabilising it, expanding it. Where do you think we can go from here?
Well, my view is that the Irish medium sector is going to continue to expand because more and more people want their children to be educated bilingually, and there are all sorts of cognitive developmental reasons why children should be educated bilingually, all sorts of advantages there, and I mean, parents should have a choice to send their children to Irish medium, or if they want to go to integrated or to controlled or maintained. But what the system overall should be based on is equity. You know, that if parents want to send their children to an Irish medium school, that they will have access to the same facilities and the same opportunities as any other sector. We're not looking to give Irish medium sector any sort of advantage over other sectors. We're not interested in that.
Thank you.
To draw a line on that, so Michelle was next. If I could just, and I understand that it's very easy to broaden things out very quickly, but we're trying to keep this focus to the actual bill as much as we can on our evidence session, because time is against us. So Michelle, you're next.
Going to I have only one question, and it's very focused on the bill. Thank you both for the evidence today. So we obviously have done some legislation in the committee, and we've talked a lot about mays and musts and the difference and the weight behind those. In clause 1, paragraph 5,
In preparing the workforce plan, the department must take into account. Are we happy that is, with that advice to you that language was strong enough in terms of making sure those subsequent points will be included in the workforce plan? I know it's technical language, so I'm just trying to make sure.
Oh yeah, sorry. We left that to the drafter. Really, he reassured us that it was sufficient because you've laid out what should be taken into account, and you've also outlined the consultees that should be engaged with. So you would like to think that that's.
And you feel confident then that that advice and everything you've looked at, this is going to deliver what you wanted to deliver.
Well, we were reassured, and we were quite, pedantic as well in our back and forth. So we were happy enough. Yeah.
This is literally all I wanted to ask.
I mean, sometimes, Michelle, when you get a piece of legislation like this, it's not always possible. In fact, it's probably never possible to be totally prescriptive, about the outcomes that you want. And we weren't prescriptive in terms of the measures that we want. There's issues around bursaries and other incentives and so on, because we believe that will come out when stakeholders are consulted, if this becomes law, and then the department will be informed about what exactly is needed within Irish medium.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. If I could just pick up on that then, just really briefly, because it's in that section that Michelle has referred to, that must take into account phrase. Would there be any argument that a stronger form of words, something along the lines of must seek to meet the current and future expected demands upon the workforce, and then taking into account those further clauses, sub-clauses B to E? It's just because, it sort of was in my mind to ask about, how can we be sure that once a plan's developed that it'll actually be acted upon, and I just wondered if there's anything we could do to strengthen it, because, we know, and the history of Irish medium education and other issues in the education sector, when budgets are tight, if you can write a plan and not do anything with it, then that's what the department will seek to do. So it's just, again, I'll put it out there for future reflection, just on whether there's any way to strengthen it.
It's certainly something worth considering, and we're happy to look at any proposed amendments that come forward.
Thank you. No other indications. There was any other member looking at this stage? Peter?
Yep, no, it's fine. Thanks, Pat, for coming to committee, and Patrick. Look, on the way through, and just in the discussions we've had, there has been some chat about, I think Pat used the phrase equal footing and equity, and obviously those are important to you, they're important to me. Would you, in the first instance, accept that IME already has additional legislative benefits in that sector due to the 98 order and the duty on the department to facilitate and encourage Irish medium education in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, well, Integrated had the same statutory obligation, or in fact that was strengthened with the Integrated Education Act there a couple of years ago. That's necessary in order to bring the Irish medium sector up onto an equal footing with other sectors. So for example, one of the issues that we sort of didn't get into any detail yesterday, though it was mentioned in broad brush strokes, about the need to recruit teachers in specialist subjects, particularly STEM subject, and everybody acknowledges that there's a shortage also in other sectors. There's no doubt about that. But what people don't realise, and this is where a Minister of Education needs to look at, it's almost impossible to do a degree in Irish along with a STEM subject in the north here. Almost impossible. Because most of the degrees with Irish also include stuff from humanities. None of the STEM subjects. So that's an issue that has to be addressed. It's not a matter of saying, we need more Irish teachers who can teach STEM subjects. There needs to be fundamental change within the system that produces STEM teachers and STEM teachers with Irish. So, you know, when there's a duty on a minister to encourage and facilitate, I mean, that's an area where they could be using that statutory obligation and looking at difficulties, structural difficulties within the system that need to be sorted out.
That's an interesting point, Pat. Is that at an initial teacher training college, or is that at Queen's? The example you gave me.
No, well, there is actually. Let me just find a note that I have here. There's no standalone Irish medium PGCE for post-primary education in the north of Ireland. And instead, prospective teachers must apply for a mainstream subject-specific PGCE at either Queen's or UU, or separately express an interest in undertaking an Irish medium enhancement immersion education certificate at St Mary's.
I think I'd heard that. You could tell where my next question is obviously going to go to. Like, that's not something for the department. Both of those institutions you mentioned fall within economy. And I'm going at supply and demand. You know, I think my wider point, Pat, is if there's demand in these areas, then naturally supply should meet that. But that's a question for economy, surely, to answer.
But it's the education minister who sets the numbers.
Yeah.
It's the economy who provides the funding. So again, that's a matter of collaboration between different ministers.
I'll just comment on some of that stuff, just to look at the contrast. So we've had last year the announcement about some bursaries for here. So just to contrast on what's happening in other places. So our bill obviously aims to give practical effect to the existing statutory duty. But so if we look at Wales, targeted support for Welsh medium teaching includes a £5,000 training grant and a further £5,000 retention payment. But that's backed by legislation requiring the expansion of Welsh medium education. And then in Scotland, there's bursaries of between 15 to 20,000, which explicitly support Gaelic medium teaching across primary and post-primary. And there's additional training grants, and that's within a statutory framework as well to promote the language. So in both jurisdictions, funding is ring-fenced, immersion-specific, and aligned to legal duties to actually grow the language medium sector. So in the north, by contrast, Irish medium education now must compete within a capped pool of around 130 general bursaries. There's no standalone strategic approach, there's no retention incentives, and there's no equivalent legislative driver that exists in those jurisdictions.
That's fine. The only other thing I was...
Just be very brief.
Well, okay,
Peter, yeah.
okay, fine. I mean, look, my understanding, and we do want, and I'm sure you'd accept this, we want to target both funding and support to those who most need it. And clearly, I think you've decided with this bill that IME education is the one that needs it. If you contrast some of the results from either the controlled or maintained schools, post-primary schools in Northern Ireland, a lot of those are performing less successfully than Irish medium. In fact, Irish medium is stripping them out. Part of the reason for that, Pat, is what you mentioned earlier about bilingualism and the effect that has. I would put it to you that actually both the controlled and maintained sector need more support than Irish medium. And if we go by results, I can give you all the stats that you need. You guys, and it's to agree, it's praise for the IME sector that they're outstripping a lot of non-selective maintained and controlled schools. But if we're serious about equity, we're serious about trying to support those schools that are most in need, I would say if we look at the results, there's schools in the control and maintained sector that need support more in terms of some legislative duties.
Need to be a really brief response again. We're very much into the wider principles rather than the detail of the bill here.
Moving way off the bill, but I've said this before, Peter, and I'd say it again. I'm happy to support any initiative in any sector, in any school that will help raise outcomes. Any one at all, and a lot of it, in my view, doesn't require significant funding. I think the raise money, for example, from the Shared Island Fund was a wasted opportunity. We could have reinstated the Engage programme, which proved to be successful in the aftermath of COVID. We could have recruited new young teachers to go in and do literacy and numeracy to help kids who are falling behind. And if we look at many, I mean, I said to you to read Lucy Crahan's book. I mean, I think it's an excellent book, and I think some of the issues that she raises, and unfortunately, I mean, your party, and you can speak for your own party, the whole issue of academic selection, you know, affects what is happening in our education system. And I'm not going to get into that debate, Chair. No, I see you getting restless.
Well done for stopping him there, Chair.
Also, but Peter, this will...
Patrick, I'm just going to draw a line. I think we're way off the scope of the bill here. So I think we'll draw a line of given a fair bit of latitude. David, you were next.
Just bemused that Lucy Crahan continues to be the patron saint of education and Michael Gove in two different, depending on what we're talking about her. But thanks, Chair, for that. Pat, can I ask, just to follow on from Pete's point, what what Economy has done and what work they've done in order to establish the need and support for Irish with STEM subjects at university level, if that is a key part of what the dearth is in terms of being able to recruit teachers?
Go ahead.
Just initially, before Pat comes in, the education side hasn't provided them with an assessment or with a shopping list of what they need essentially to fulfil the posts in their schools. So realistically, the Economy can't really do much without that evidence at this stage.
Presumably, though, we're probably getting off the scope of the bill and talking about this, but in terms of the need for Irish-speaking STEM graduates, it won't just apply to education if it's going to be economically viable and something that people are going to get degrees and move into, because eventually there might not be the teaching post for everybody, or there may be. But so has there been any work done to establish that you're aware of? I understand you're not on the Economy Committee, Pat, but just in terms of Sinn Féin point of view, you're...
I'm not, and I prefer to direct my attention to education, because ultimately it's the responsibility of the Education Minister to make a decision on how many teacher training places are needed. Now, he can't do that without knowing from within the sector what exactly is needed. But the sector has been crying out for quite a while now about the shortage of teachers, not just specialist subjects, but
you'd agree that STEM issue though is a challenge across the board. It's not an Irish medium. It's not a unique situation for them. It's largely to do with the wages that people can get with those degrees outside of education that the public sector can't compete with.
I absolutely accept that. But what you need to accept, David, is that as hard as it is to get teachers to teach STEM subjects, it's even more difficult to get someone who speaks Irish fluently and can deliver a STEM subject in a school. And even, I mean, people could go in and maybe teach history or maths or English or whatever, but in the STEM subjects, it's fairly technical language.
I can imagine.
You know, so there's a greater need for more precision in the language that's being used. So, a lot of people will describe themselves as fluent in Irish. Doesn't necessarily mean they could.
No, yes, they couldn't do law in Irish. I understand that.
So, as difficult as it is to get STEM teachers and for English medium schools, it's much more difficult to get someone who can speak Irish and deliver.
I understand. I do understand that principle, but I think the difference is that when we've already got a statutory duty and we're looking at this bill, my concern is that how often do we look at issues that are happening across the board on education, but hive off one part and say this is exceptional, and there's definitely caveats and things that we can look at and maybe it needs to be given special attention, but does it need, because I think this does further elevate one sector, and I think it was the same with the integrated. You'll be familiar with our views on the integrated education bill, but it's again taking one sector and trying to raise it above all others, and that's the concern I have. In terms of is there any forecast in terms of the incentives? You talked about incentives in Wales, what that would cost to do here, and can I ask, because I'm not adverse to sort of golden cuffs schemes and so on at times, but when is the sunset clause in that? When if there's a bursary and a retention element to it, how long do people have to stay in the system before they would? I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that we should have a bursary just for Irish language teachers, but in the Welsh system, what does that look like?
So on our bill, we don't prescribe any actions or interventions like that. We want the consultation to draw that out. So we can't really put any costs or anything like that at this stage on that. You know.
And I think it would be exceptionalism, so an issue with that, but I do think it's worth investigating.
But clearly the Minister already has in his mind the possibility of bursaries and incentives and so on in a general sense. So, I mean, it's a view obviously within the department that if we want STEM teachers, we're going to need to do something to try and recruit them.
Just in terms of right of reply, because I think there was a sort of slight at the DUP, and I understand Irish language, we've discussed this, can be a controversial issue at times, and the way in which we perceive it to be used, and your view will be different. I think that does have to be separated out from this Minister's handling of Irish medium education. I think we had in Chamber, when we had the day, Pat, a bit of a blow at the Minister about how there's a lack of trust there. But we had, I mean, Cara stood in the Chamber and her colleagues stood in the Chamber and said that whenever they went to ask him, he done things for them for a particular school. He has give development proposals for Irish education nurseries. He has announced new bills for Irish medium education.
Just so time, understand.
Well, I just think we do have to give balance to the fact that this is not a minister who has a track record of rallying against Irish medium education, but he has a track record actually of supporting it. And the only other thing I would finish with, Chair, is I understand Cara's concern around the temporary classrooms and the crumbling estate. But again, every one of us can go into schools in every sector across Northern Ireland, and that is exactly the same. We're crumbling walls, we have facilities needed. The education budget is underfunded to the degree of £600 million. How are we going to fix that? Thanks very much, Chair.
Well, I have never having a good rehearsal of the second stage debate here. Pat, very brief final response.
I've never said the Minister has done nothing. And I said it yesterday. I don't mention that issue of trust to score points. I'm stating it as a fact that the trust isn't there. And I used that example yesterday of the LEAFA bursaries as to why there isn't trust.
I understand there's tension on both sides and how we perceive each other around this issue, but I think it's right to provide context and balance in terms of the Minister of the things he has done for Irish medium education.
I think you had a good opportunity to air that as the bill sponsor. Looking for other indications, I don't have any at the moment, so I think that brings the evidence session to an end. So
just could I mention one other thing, Chair, and the Minister mentioned yesterday about appointing a person in Irish medium schools for AI, right? And that raises more concerns with me than anything else. I mean, this is about, Google Translate or something like that, instead of teachers having to sit down and translate stuff. And we've seen some of the dogs' dinners that have come out of Google Translate and AI and so on. So that issue doesn't fill me with confidence either, I have to say. So.
No, thank you. So I think I can invite the Deputy Chair to resume his seat here as we finish up our discussions on any actions arising from that. And thank you, Patrick, for your evidence today in both sessions. Okay, so as with the previous item on the agenda, next week we will have the opportunity to look at an outlined timescale for the committee stage for this bill, and we can agree any extension required and any motion arising from that at next week's meeting. So other questions to just cover off in relation to the evidence session. First of all, we have at page 21 of tabled papers, the stakeholder list, and then we also, I just wanted to just raise a point of clarity. The RAISE paper that's in your packs, I think, lists the bodies, I think there's about 20 of them, as witnesses rather than consultees.
Yeah.
I think I would want to just emphasise, I think it needs to be witnesses consultees rather than witnesses. I don't imagine we'll have 20. Consultees, I think we'll go with. So
just table papers, sure.
So we have
Give me a page.
The stakeholder list is page 21 of tabled papers, but in your main pack there is a RAISE paper, I think. Yeah, it's 8.6, page 59 of your 159 of the main pack, and it does list them as potential witnesses. So that was really just my slight concern that it would maybe become a wee bit unwieldy if we went.
I was going to say I have no objection to hearing from them all, Chair.
Okay. So are we content to go out to the stakeholder list at page 21 of tabled papers? We agreed?
Can I ask a wee question, Chair?
You can indeed.
How do we get the stakeholder lists? How are they put together?
Well, that would be for the clerk to
I think does it not say on it that it's from the Research and Library Services?
It says it's potential list of witnesses, Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill, and it gives a big list. Brown O'Connor seems they're on every stakeholder list. It's amazing.
So
they're on this as well.
Brown O'Connor
there's a standard Education Committee stakeholder list which we notify of everything that the committee's doing. So that might include Brown O'Connor.
Is it by
so
request,
it's not specifically, yeah, so stakeholders can contact the committee and ask to be included.
Right, no objection, but it was a curiosity for me as well.
And then RAISE have given like a specific list for each of the bills, depending on who the additional stakeholders are
so
it
might be a sort of general thing. So I just noticed that the difference between the two stakeholders list is that there's a lot of similar people, and then you've got on this one like Forrest na Gaeilge. I pronounce that okay? And so it looks like there's a it looks like there's this. Well, the minister man is in the chamber. It looks like it looks like there is a sort of like a standard stakeholder list, and then there's additionals. Is that the way it works?
I could maybe speak to my understanding, as if we've got this right, is that there's a standard Education Committee stakeholder list that goes out on everything, and then we have a RAISE paper which is specific consultees for this bill that are being highlighted, as we would definitely want to reach out to them. So that those are the two lists that we've got on our packs. So perhaps if the clerk could speak to which is the one we're going out to.
Well, so no, we will notify everyone of what the committee is doing. So it's doing committee stage of 2 private members' bills, and all of those people on the main list will be notified. And also then the specific list created by RAISE of specialist stakeholders for the 2 topics in question.
I think I'm getting more lost than less lost. Are they? So I'm on page 21. And it says potential list of witnesses, Irish Medium Education Workforce Plan Bill, right? And it's got a big list. And it looks like there's maybe a standard list of stakeholders and then some new ones like Forrest na Gaeilge and some others that are very particular to the subject area, I guess, that we're going to look at. I was just wondering how that list is put together.
Again, the clerk maybe speak
Sorry,
to that.
I thought I said it already. So it is a combination of 2 lists. One of which is a generic list.
Yep.
And I apologise if I didn't
I'm there.
explain that very
That's
well
okay.
before,
Agenda items,
but-
Peter, 8.6 and 8.7. 8.7 looks like 8.6 has been amalgamated into that. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be what we do with every item of business like this. So yeah, apologies.
So, just to be clear in what we're agreeing, we are agreeing to write out to our standard Education Committee stakeholder list, but there is that includes those bodies that were highlighted by RAISE who have been added to that. Okay, are we all agreed?
We are.
We are agreed. The other item to agree is the draft survey, which is at page 27 of tabled papers. Are we all in agreement that can be issued out? Agreed? Okay. And we will return to the committee stage length at next week's committee meeting. Okay. Is there anything else anyone needs to add before we close this agenda item off? I'm content to close it. Okay. Item 9 on our agenda, members, is an oral briefing from Assembly Legal Services on the General Teaching Council Bill, and I'm going to propose we move into closed session if members are agreed, as it will be legally privileged. We all agreed?
Agreed.
Move into closed session.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Can I just ask the clerk then to summarise the nature of the discussion in closed session and any actions arising from that?
So the closed session, in the closed session, Assembly Legal Services outlined the content of a convention rights memo, which went through each provision of the GTC bill and advised that where rights are engaged, appropriate safeguards are provided. The committee also considered an update from the department on its proposed regulations and agreed to ask a few questions of the department about the detail of that.
Okay, thank you. So that then takes us on to item 10 on the agenda, and that is the Department of Education disposal and retention schedule, which is at page 196 of your packs. And apologise, there's a bit of preamble I need to go through here for members. So in accordance with the Public Records Act NI 1923 and the Rules of Disposal of Documents Order 1925, NI departments in the wider NI public sector are required to develop and maintain a schedule which covers all records regardless of format, which are created by each of their functional business areas. The legislation lays down the procedures both for the destruction of records deemed to have no long-term value and for the preservation and transfer to PRONI of records selected for permanent preservation. Once a schedule has been drafted by the public body, PRONI, in accordance with its statutory duties, will quality assure its contents and lay the schedule before the Assembly. The schedule is subject to the negative resolution procedure, and any member or committee may seek a resolution to pray for the preservation of specified records in a retention and disposal schedule. Assembly committees have a role in scrutinising the actions of their respective departments, their retention and disposal schedules. The Committee for Communities has a scrutiny and coordinating role linked to its responsibility for scrutinising the Department of Communities and PRONI. So I will then be asking members at this stage for any views on the Department of Education disposal and retention schedule, and if any member or if the committee as a whole is not content with the schedule, they may seek a resolution to pray for the preservation of specified records in a retention and disposal schedule. So I will put the question then, and we will see if there's anybody who has anything they wish to add. So that the Committee for Education has considered the Department of Education disposal and retention schedule and has no objection to the schedule. Is that agreed, or are there any issues that members wish to raise? Agreed. That is agreed. Okay. Agreed. Item 11. So this is Statutory Rule 2026/53, the Education Pupil Reporting Amendment Regulations of Northern Ireland 2026. So there's a draft statutory rule at pages 263 to 266 for your reference. I'm not going to go into any detail on this at this stage because the examiner wasn't able to provide advice for committee for this week, and that will be available for us next week. So I'm just seeking agreement from the committee that they are that we are content to defer a decision on this statutory rule until that advice is received. Are we agreed?
Yes, we're just noting receipt of the
note receipt, and we'll receive advice from the examiner next week. Okay, item 12 on the agenda then is correspondence, and that's at pages 270 to 428 of your packs and pages 404 to 413 of tabled papers, where there's some additional correspondence provided. Summary notes at page 270. There is a fair bit to get through, and I'll just raise those items that need committee decision or discussion. Otherwise, it's as per summary note. Item 12.3 on page 274 is correspondence from an individual in response to the special educational needs SEN regulations. Are members content to add that correspondence to the evidence for its consideration of the statutory rule? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Item 12.4, page 276, response from the Minister of Education on funding for Tiny Life charity. The Minister indicates that the Tiny Start programme aligns with the draft Northern Ireland Executive Early Life Childcare Strategy, but the decisions on future funding and the associated impacts will be considered in the context of the Department's 26-27 budget allocation. I'm aware that interim funding has now been provided to the charity up to the end of June, so are members content to share the Minister's response with Tiny Life, but I would also want to propose that we write to the Minister to urge him to provide that funding certainty as soon as possible, given that he has outlined a clear strategic significance and alignment with the programme and the Department's activities, and also let Tiny Life know we've taken that action. Are we agreed on that? Agreed. Item 12.5, page 277, is a response from the Department of Education on the correspondence we had received from St Mary's Primary School in 5 Mile Town in relation to their proposal for the notion of strategically important small schools. Are we agreed to share that with the Board of Governors of the school who raised the matter with committee? Agreed.
Agreed. Item
12.6, page 279, is correspondence from the Committee for Finance, providing an analysis of the February outturn and forecast outturn. Happy to seek members' views. I'm happy to propose we note, unless there's anything in particular. Michelle?
One query, if we could ask about, there was a line in there about 0.3 million easement on earmarked funding for childcare from DFE. Just wanted to understand what that money was that was being handed back and why.
Members are agreed that we raise that with the economy committee, I imagine, in the department. Okay. Item 12.7 on page 325 is correspondence from the Controlled Schools Support Council on the Special Educational Needs Regulations NI 2026. Are we content to add that to its to the committee's evidence for consideration of the statutory rule? Is it agreed?
Do you want to invite them at all on the SENREGs?
I wasn't minded to invite CSSC. I thought that their evidence was fairly comprehensive and clear. They were supportive, but certainly if any member wants to reach out to them directly, that's obviously fine. But we're agreed to add that to the evidence for the consideration of the statutory rule. Item 12.8, page 330 is correspondence from the Assembly Business Office regarding the statutory period for the education pupil reporting amendment regulations. Are members content to note, and that was dealt with at a previous agenda item anyway, are we agreed on that?
Agreed.
Yeah. Item 12.9, page 336 is correspondence from the Committee for the Executive Office providing a copy of correspondence to the Department of Education regarding its implementation of the Armed Forces Covenant. Are members content to note? Agreed.
Yes.
Oh, Peter? Yeah.
Chair, is there any action that we should be taking on this? I was reading both memos there. This is obviously the clerk to the Executive Office writing to the clerk to the Committee for Education. Am I right in saying that is this just to committees, or is the Executive Office writing to departments as well? I'm trying to get the context of what.
They're letting us know that they're writing to our department.
That's all it is?
Yeah, so it's just a courtesy to kind of let the committee know in each instance, yeah.
All right, no, that's fine, thanks.
And I would assume when the department writes to the Executive Office Committee, we'll get sight of that.
100%.
Okay, item 12.10, page 338, it's correspondence from the Committee for the Economy seeking a further joint event with the Committee for Education in relation to skills issues. Look, happy to open this up for members' discussion, whether that's something we want to take forward. Very conscious of the amount that is on the committee's workload at the minute, and so I'm happy to hear from members whether we feel between now and recess that is something we want to take forward.
Sure. I spoke to our rep on that committee. Excuse me, Padraig Delargy, who had raised it with us about doing a joint meeting, and I explained to him that we were flat to the mat here in this committee. And he suggested maybe a Tuesday morning or something like that, which wouldn't really eat into, our formal usual committee agenda. Time. Yeah. So I would have no difficulty with that.
I've no problem in linking in with the committee around an informal briefing. I would be of a mind that in terms of our scheduled formal sit-ins of the committee, we'll probably have enough to keep us occupied between now and recess. So are we agreed to engage with it?
Just in terms of I'm just thinking in terms of two committees being involved and what might come up in the chamber. Is it worth writing to the business committee? I know I'm on the business committee, just to declare that, but business committee, so that when we're considering if there's a date comes up, that members around the business committee table are reminded that it might be worth, even if you have to switch two motions around or whatever, or to allow members of the two committees to append something like that. I don't know how that. Because you could end up with a situation where you arrange that and people from education or economy end up having to be in the chamber. I don't know as a new member,
my feeling would be that works, but potentially if we did something around the space where we've done informal meetings on a Tuesday or a Tuesday lunchtime 1 p.m. meeting, that would perhaps avoid the need to have any clashes with the chamber, if you're content with that.
Yeah, shall I try to organise that?
Okay. Item 12.11, page 339 is correspondence from the Committee for the Executive Office providing copy of correspondence to the Minister of Education seeking an update on the work being undertaken in relation to the Ending Violence Against Women and Girls framework. Happy to hear members' views, but I would propose we note. Agreed. Item 12.13, page 346 is correspondence from Social Investment Board NI providing the Strategic Investment Board NI providing the investing activity report for Department of Education. Happy to seek members' views, but would propose we note. Item 12.15, page 367, and then item 12.27, page 425, correspondence from individuals regarding the initial teacher education bursary scheme. I would propose that we share with those correspondents the previous reply the committee had from the Minister of Education on the decisions around the timing and scheduling of that bursary, and invite further response if they think there is more that we could do to highlight that, if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 12.17, page 370, item 12.18, page 373, response from the Public Health Agency on clean air in schools, and a response from the Minister for Education on updated clean air in schools guidance in England. Are we content to share those responses with the correspondent who raised the issues with committee? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Item 12.19, page 375, is a response from the Department of Education providing a written briefing paper on the enhanced support model, which is out for consultation at the minute from the EA. So happy to seek members' views. It's a detailed paper. It's well worth engaging with. I would suggest that we should absolutely add it to our evidence papers for the SEN inquiry. And my initial thoughts on looking at the paper would be that thinking about recommendations, undoubtedly the role of classroom assistants is something that we may want to consider in our report. And I would already be thinking of issues around the need for the EA to really clearly articulate what the alternative support model is, because at the moment it feels so high level as I'm not really clear. Looking at a clear timeline, perhaps for reforming and enhancing the classroom assistant workforce. And the issue that comes through in that correspondence as well is that neither the department nor EA seem to have any clear measures of success for any interventions they make in relation to special educational needs, and that perhaps could be an area where recommendations might be helpful. So happy to hear other views, but other than that, to note really for the inquiry papers. We're all agreed? Agreed. Item 12.20, page 400, correspondence from the Department of Education providing an SL1 for the Education School Development Plans Regulations Northern Ireland 2026. It's really for members to note that we'll return to this at our next meeting, if we're all agreed.
Right.
Item 12.22, page 413, correspondence from the Committee for Justice seeking the Committee's views on the Criminal Justice Sentencing Bill. Happy to seek members' views, but I don't think it particularly engages this committee, and would be content to advise of a nil response if members are agreed. Agreed. Item 12.23, page 415, it's an invite to myself as chair to speak at the ARC Policy Roundtable event at Ulster University Belfast campus Thursday the 4th of June on the Taking Boys Seriously research. Are members content to accept that invite? Agreed. Item 12.24, page 416 is correspondence from the Education Authority providing suggested dates for a demonstration of the digital statementing system. Now, this was circulated before recess and it had come up on our briefing with the EA. We have a couple of members who've volunteered to attend. So I just really want to check if any other members have availability for that date. I'm not able to attend. I have a constituency commitment that morning, and also, it's for members really if it's whether it's strategically significant for members to attend this or not. Michelle, you don't.
I did reply diligently to give. I'm available out of those 2 dates, but I'm happy enough of not to go. I'm not sure given pressures.
I think it was a very welcome invite from the EA to come and have a look at it, but I think just given the pressures and the amount of assembly business we're dealing with, I'm content to say that we perhaps just park that for now and maybe one for when work pressures are eased. Okay. Item 12.25, page 417, it's correspondence from the Minister of Education regarding engagement with executive ministers on the introduction of education and training post-compulsory school age bill, which would require young people to remain in education or training for the 2 years after they reach compulsory school age. I would want to propose we note. Are we agreed? Agreed. Item 12.28, page 428, it's a response from the Minister of Education on concerns about an anomaly affecting children in Northern Ireland who turn 11 during July and August in relation to tax-free childcare eligibility and the proposed removal of the 10% wear and tear allowance for childminders as part of the HMRC making tax digital reforms. So the Minister essentially states that while taxation is a matter for the Treasury, he has written to the Minister of Finance outlining the concerns raised by the committee, and that the Finance Minister has requested that the matter be raised directly with HMRC at the earliest opportunity. I'd want to propose we share that with the correspondent, but perhaps seek clarity from the department that we'll get a copy of any response that comes through to the Finance Minister, or indeed to the department directly if we're all agreed.
Yeah, the committee wrote directly as well.
So we should get those responses then. Item 12.28, page 129 of tabled papers. It's a request from the Knowledge and Exchange seminar series requesting myself as chair to introduce their event, which has an education focus on the 22nd of April. Are members content to agree?
Popular man.
Sorry?
You're a popular man.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. After dinner speaker and all that. Yeah. Other than that, are we content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 270? We all agreed?
Right.
Okay. Item 13 then is forward work programme. So there's forward work programme drafted at page 435. So I'll maybe ask the clerk to speak to any changes to that or any issues members should be aware of, and then we can take it from there.
So provisionally, I've added to that 2 stakeholders for the holiday hunger bill, and they would come in on the 27th of May, I think it is, and that would be Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Children in Northern Ireland, 27th of May, and then also DE, coming in on 6th of May on both private members' bills, and those spaces are really to allocate private members' bill evidence and also SEN regs evidence. So the SEN regulations are really significant. As members will recall, the survey is still open with the Code of Practice, and we've got the Children's Law Centre coming in on 13th of May about that, and I think DE and EA are keen to advise the committee as much as possible with the aim of trying to get the regs to plenary before the summer recess. But the committee's still in its SL1 scrutiny process, and it is very, very detailed. You're going to have advice from RAISE on that, but not for another couple of weeks. So I think it's not something we can entirely rush.
Yeah, I mean, I would be of the same view as that. While I understand the department wants to get this ready for the new academic year, it's just too big a piece of work for the committee to say we'll nod it through. So unless other members have any other views in terms of expediting that, I certainly would like to hear get the RAISE briefing paper and the Children's Law Centre briefing before we do anything with that. Agreed.
And Caroline and Gail Scully-Octa have already said they'll come actually, I think, the 3rd of June. So yeah, I'll keep working on those. Yeah. Okay.
That's fine. Anything else anybody wants to add to just in terms of forward work programme at this stage? No. So are we content to endorse the forward work programme as drafted? Agreed. Yeah. Item 14. Any other business? Is there any? Danny?
Yeah, just quickly. It's just about youth services, and I'm on record as my concern about the ring fencing being removed by the minister. I suppose going forward now, he's made his decision, and I'm just wondering, as a committee, could we write to the Chief Executive of the Education Authority and maybe even the Chair of the Board, just to really put on record our concern at the possibility of it not being ring fenced, and could they possibly ring fence it within the EA themselves? And look, and I say that where I don't believe that's fair of the minister doing it on them, but if we get emphasise that's what we would like to see happen, because we're really concerned about any cuts to youth services.
I mean, I'm content to endorse that correspondence. I think the position that youth services find themselves in remains a really, really concerning one. Notwithstanding budget pressures, and we all understand that, but I think once you lose a service, very hard to get it back, and that's not a service we can afford to roll the dice on. So I would be very content with that. If there are any other views, agreed. Okay.
Sorry, could I just come in another item? It's just in looking at the forward work programme, if there was any update on where we are with the committee bill.
Oh, yeah, beg your pardon. A draft committee bill has arrived. So your usual advisors are going to have a look at it, and then it should be in next week's pack. Yeah.
So we're ahead of schedule on that, I think, if I'm right in saying, in terms of getting that draft through. So that's looking positive. Yeah. So Good news. Okay, item 15 then is date, time and place of next meeting. So that is scheduled for Wednesday the 22nd of April, 2 p.m, room 29 and online. And leaves me to put the question that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed? Agreed.
Committee Room 29, Sound.